She was worth $3 billion, and she was about to lose everything that actually mattered. Not the company, not the penthouse, not the empire she'd built from nothing before she turned 30. She was about to lose a little girl who couldn't speak a word but somehow said everything with her eyes. And the only person standing between them and complete collapse was a man she'd met exactly 47 days ago. A man who had no money, no power, and absolutely no reason to stay. But he did stay, and that changed everything. Welcome to my story. Watch until the end, and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. Owen Hayes had been sitting at that cafe table for 23 minutes, and he was starting to feel like an idiot. Not the crushing, soul-destroying kind of embarrassment, more like the slow, quiet kind. The kind that builds in your chest when you realize the room is a little too loud, the coffee is a little too cold, and the woman you're supposed to meet clearly isn't coming. He checked his phone again. No message, no missed call, nothing. He turned the cup around in his hands, a habit, something his hands did when his brain was running ahead of the moment, and looked around the cafe one more time. Tuesday afternoon, a place called Birch and Bloom on the corner of Halsted and Monroe, which his cousin Darlene had described as charming and not too fancy, so you don't feel like you have to impress anyone. What Darlene had failed to mention was that it was also approximately the size of a shoebox, crammed wall to wall with people who all seemed to have somewhere urgent to be. Owen did not have somewhere urgent to be. That was the whole problem. He'd taken the afternoon off work, something he almost never did, because Darlene had spent 3 weeks telling him that Victoria Ashford was different, that she was someone worth meeting, that it would do him good to get out of the apartment for once. And because Owen loved his cousin, and because he was 32 years old and hadn't been on a real date in almost 2 years, and because some small, stubborn part of him still believed that good things were possible, he had said yes. He had showered, he had ironed his shirt, the blue one that his daughter Mia said made him look like he was trying. He had dropped Mia at school with an extra 10 minutes to spare, which was basically a miracle. He had found parking on the first attempt, which in this part of the city was the kind of thing people wrote home about. And now he was sitting here, alone, watching the door. 25 minutes. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Darlene. "Hey, she's not here. Should I give it a few more minutes, or—" He didn't finish the sentence, because the door swung open. Later, when Owen tried to describe the moment to Darlene, he struggled to explain it accurately. It wasn't like the movies. There was no slow motion, no light pouring in from behind, no moment where the entire room went quiet. What actually happened was, the door opened with a bang, a rush of October air blew a stack of napkins off the counter, and a woman came in carrying a child on her hip and a tote bag that seemed to contain roughly half of a hardware store. She was tall, taller than he expected, wearing a blazer that had probably been pressed at the beginning of the day, but was now slightly wrinkled at the sleeve. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a bun that was losing the fight. She had the look of a person who had been running, not jogging for exercise running, but running because the world is on fire running, and had arrived here already tired from whatever had come before this. The child on her hip was small, maybe 5 or 6, with dark pigtails and enormous brown eyes that were currently scanning the room with the kind of focused attention that made Owen think of a little scientist cataloging data. The woman spotted him immediately, probably because he was the only person sitting alone at a table, still holding a coffee cup, still watching the door like he'd been doing it for half an hour. "Oh no," she said, out loud, to no one in particular. And then she started walking toward him, shifting the child to her other hip, pushing through the crowd with a kind of polite but determined momentum that parted the cafe around her. She stopped at his table and looked at him with an expression that was exhausted and apologetic, and also, somehow, still composed. "You're Owen," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I am," he said. "I'm Victoria." "I'm so sorry." She said it immediately, without ceremony, like she'd been rehearsing it in the car. "I know I'm late. I know. I had her today and I couldn't leave her. And then there was a situation with the agency and then the train. It doesn't matter. I'm so sorry. I completely understand if you want to reschedule or just—" "Sit down," Owen said. She blinked. "You look like you need to sit down," he said. not unkindly. Both of you. Victoria Ashford sat across from him and put the tote bag on the floor with the careful precision of a person who had learned that this particular bag had a tendency to tip over and spill everything. The child settled in the chair beside her and looked at Owen. He looked back. The girl, he didn't know her name yet, had an expression on her face that was very still and very watchful. Not unfriendly, not shy exactly, more like she was running calculations. "This is my niece," Victoria said. "Lily, my sister." She paused. Something shifted in her face. "There was a situation this morning. I couldn't get anyone else on short notice." Owen nodded. He didn't push it. "Does she—" he started, then stopped himself, aware that it was rude to ask about a child's communication needs to someone else, while the child was sitting right there. Instead, he looked at Lily directly. "Hi," he said. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then she raised her small hands and signed something. Owen didn't know sign language. Not a word of it at that point. He looked at Victoria. Victoria's face did something complicated. "She said you have kind eyes." The table was quiet for a second. "Tell her thank you," Owen said. Victoria signed it. Lily smiled. Not a big performance of a smile, just a small, genuine one, and looked back at Owen like the matter was settled. And something in Owen's chest, which had been tight with irritation for the better part of an hour, went loose. The date was not what either of them had planned. There was no flowing conversation about hobbies and career goals and what they were looking for. There was no flirtation, no careful performance of best self. What happened instead was that the waiter came, and Owen ordered another coffee and a hot chocolate, because Lily had pointed at the menu with the focused intensity of a person who knew exactly what she wanted. And somehow a plate of cookies ended up on the table. And 40 minutes passed before Owen even checked his phone. Victoria, he noticed, was constantly monitoring everything, watching Lily's cup to make sure it wasn't too close to the edge, tracking the noise level of the café with a kind of ambient awareness that suggested she was always calculating how much was too much. Checking her own phone periodically, not rudely, but with the practiced subtlety of someone whose phone had a tendency to contain emergencies. But in between all of that, she talked to him. Not in the polished boardroom way that he would have expected from someone whose name he'd seen in a Forbes article Darlene had texted him the week before. "Just so you have some background context," Darlene had said, which was Darlene's way of saying she'd done a full background check. In person, Victoria Ashford talked like someone who hadn't had a proper conversation in a while and had forgotten how much she missed it. She talked about the cafe's terrible pastry selection and the way the October light came through the window at that particular angle, and about a book she'd been trying to finish for 3 months because she kept falling asleep after page 12. "What book?" Owen asked. "It's embarrassing. Now I really need to know." She looked at him sideways. There was something dry and self-aware in her expression, like she'd made the calculation and decided to trust him with the small thing before the bigger ones. "It's a thriller. A very popular thriller. Everyone has read it. It has been on every airport bookshelf for 2 years. It is, by all accounts, completely unputdownable. And you're on page 12. "I've been on page 12 3 times, she said. "I keep starting over because I fall asleep and forget what happened." Owen laughed. A real laugh, not the polite kind. "What happens on page 12? "Someone gets pushed off a yacht," Victoria said, with the weary delivery of a person who had failed to care about this event many times. "It's very dramatic. I just don't—" She glanced at Lily, who was carefully arranging cookie crumbs into a pattern on the table. "I don't have a lot of space for dramatic right now." "Fair enough," Owen said. She looked at him then, and he had the impression that she was measuring something, deciding something. "Your cousin said you have a daughter," she said. "Mia. She's 8. What's she like?" He thought about it for a second. "Opinionated," he said. "Reads everything she can get her hands on. Has very strong feelings about breakfast foods. Doesn't like when people talk to her like she's a kid, even though she is, in fact, a kid." He paused. "She's the best person I know." Victoria was quiet for a moment. She looked at Lily again. "Yeah," she said softly. "I know that feeling." They stayed for almost 2 hours. That was the part that surprised him afterward. Not the length of it exactly, but the quality. The fact that time had moved the way it does when you stop watching it, not slowly or quickly, just differently. The fact that when Victoria finally looked at her phone and said, "I have to get her home, she needs to eat a real dinner," Owen felt the specific weight of a good thing ending. They stood up together, navigating the awkward ritual of coats and bags, and the tote bag, which did in fact tip over, scattering lip balm and a small notebook and what appeared to be an Allen wrench across the floor. "That's," Victoria started. "I got it," Owen said, and crouched down to collect everything without making it into a thing. When he stood up and handed her the Allen wrench, she looked at it for a second with an expression that was specifically tired. The tiredness of a person who is used to being quietly competent and occasionally resents that they have to be. "I've been trying to fix a drawer in Lily's room," she said. "The one that sticks. I keep meaning to—" She stopped. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about my drawer." "A drawer that sticks is a real problem," Owen said. He meant it genuinely. She looked at him like she couldn't quite figure out what to do with that. Lily, meanwhile, had grabbed Owen's hand. Not dramatically, not with any apparent plan. She'd just reached up and taken it the way a child takes a hand when they're ready to leave and expect the adults to follow. Owen looked down at her. She looked back up at him with those serious, watchful eyes. He walked them to the door. Outside, on the sidewalk, Victoria turned to him in the October wind and said, "This wasn't what I expected." "What did you expect?" She thought about it. "Less cookies," she said. "More awkward silences." There were some awkward silences. There were, she agreed, but they were the tolerable kind. That, Owen would later decide, was the moment. Not when Lily signed that he had kind eyes. Not the laughter, not the cookies, not the Allen wrench. It was that. The tolerable kind. Said so simply, without decoration, by a woman who clearly didn't have room in her life for things that weren't worth keeping. He watched them go down the sidewalk. Victoria tall and slightly windblown, Lily holding her hand and walking with the deliberate step of a child who is thinking about something. He stood there for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he walked back to his car. His apartment was 17 minutes from the café, on a good day, and Owen made it in 14 because he got every light green, which never happened and which felt, stupidly, like a sign. He changed out of the ironed blue shirt, picked up Mia from his neighbor Mrs. Caldwell's place, made pasta because it was Tuesday, and they had pasta on Tuesdays, and sat at the kitchen table while Mia told him at length about a conflict at school involving a science project and someone named Jacob who had apparently been incredibly unfair about the egg drop assignment. Owen listened. He asked the right questions. He passed the Parmesan. But part of his brain was still at the cafe table, watching a woman say the tolerable kind like it cost her something. "Dad," Mia said. "You're doing the thing where you're here, but not here." Owen looked at her. She was 8 years old, and she had her mother's eyes and his sister's frown, and she had developed over the course of her short life an unnerving ability to read him. "Sorry," he said. "I'm here. Jacob and the egg." "The egg drop project," Mia corrected with some dignity. "And I don't want to talk about it anymore. I worked it out." She stabbed a piece of pasta. "How was your thing?" "My thing?" "Your date thing." She said it without particular weight, which he appreciated. Mia had a practical relationship with the fact that her father occasionally tried to have a life. She'd had 2 years to get used to it. "It was good," he said. She looked at him. "It was actually good," he said. Which surprised me. "Is she nice?" Owen thought about the Allen wrench. About 23 minutes of waiting versus 2 hours of something he hadn't expected. About a little girl signing kind eyes across a cafe table before she'd communicated another word. "Yeah," he said. He paused. "There's a lot going on with her." "There's a lot going on with everyone," Mia said, with the authority of a person who had absorbed this truth at a cellular level. She was 8. She talked like this sometimes. He'd stopped being surprised. He looked at his daughter and felt the familiar thing, the specific gravity of loving someone so much that the rest of the world had to arrange itself around that weight. "Yeah," he said. "True." Boycott. Victoria texted him that night, late, almost 11, which he noticed. The message was short. Lily asked me to tell you thank you for the hot chocolate. She also said, and I'm quoting, that you seem like a person who would be good in an emergency. I don't know where she got that from, but I thought you should know. He read it twice. Then he typed back, tell her I think she's got good instincts. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She says she knows. He was smiling when he put the phone down. He didn't try to stop it. The second time they saw each other was Owen's idea, which surprised him because he was not by nature someone who pushed for things. He was more of a wait-and-see person. He'd learned it from years of managing construction projects where half the job was knowing when to act and when to let the situation develop on its own. But Victoria had mentioned, somewhere between the cookies and the Allen wrench, that Lily was going to a sensory-friendly exhibit at the Science Museum the following weekend, and that she was planning to take her alone because it was always a lot to manage by herself, and she'd said it not as a complaint, but as the kind of flat statement of fact that people make when they have forgotten that asking for help is an option. Owen texted and asked if they could use an extra set of hands. There was a long pause, longer than usual. Then, are you sure? It can be a lot. He typed back, I have an 8-year-old. I'm familiar with a lot. Another pause. Okay, but I'm warning you. She has opinions about exhibits. So does Mia. They'll get along fine. The museum was chaotic in the organized way that children's museums are always chaotic. Structured noise, deliberate sensory management, adults in matching t-shirts directing traffic with practiced patience. Victoria had arranged everything in advance, the quiet entry time, the sensory kit they could borrow at the front desk, the specific path through the exhibits that avoided the 3 loudest sections. Owen watched her work through the logistics at the welcome desk and thought about what it would be like to always be this prepared, to carry this much organizational weight just to give one small person a good afternoon. Mia stood beside him, holding her own backpack straps with both hands, watching Lily with the particular attention of a child who is deciding whether another child is interesting. Lily was standing slightly behind Victoria, also watching Mia. A beat passed. Mia signed hello. Badly, imprecisely. She'd clearly looked it up on her phone in the car, but she signed it. Lily looked startled. Then she smiled. Then she signed something back. What did she say? Mia asked, turning to Owen. I don't know, Owen said. I don't know sign language. Mia turned back to Lily. She held up her phone, typed something, and showed it to her. Lily looked at it. She took the phone, typed something back. Mia read it. She says I need to work on my J, she told Owen with great seriousness. And also she wants to know if I like space or animals better. What are you going to say? Mia took the phone back and typed, showed it to Lily. Lily considered, then nodded with the gravity of someone finalizing a business agreement. Victoria appeared at Owen's elbow. Did they just decide something? I think they settled on a route, Owen said. Victoria watched the 2 girls walk ahead of them toward the first exhibit. Mia holding the phone, Lily pointing at things and typing responses, both of them apparently in deep negotiation about the order of operations. That was quick, Victoria said. Kids are efficient when they find someone they like, Owen said. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Not the heavy kind of quiet, just the kind that comes when you're watching something and don't want words to get in the way. Then she said, she doesn't do that easily. Trust, I mean. She... A pause. A careful pause. She's had a complicated year. Owen didn't ask what that meant. He filed it away. Mia had a complicated year a while back too, he said instead. She came out the other side of it. Not the same, but okay. Victoria looked at him sideways. What happened? She asked. Then immediately, sorry, you don't have to... Her mom and I split when she was 5, Owen said. It was messy. The way those things are when there's a kid involved and both people are tired and hurt and not at their best. He paused. Mia took it hard. For a while, she kind of went quiet. Not Lily's kind of quiet, just... He searched for the right word. Careful. Like she was watching everything for signs. Victoria nodded. She got less careful eventually, he said. Took about a year, and then one day she just... He laughed a little, remembering it. One day she came home from school and told me she'd decided to sign up for the science club because, and I quote, "someone has to be the one who knows things." And I knew she was back. Victoria smiled. It was a different smile than the careful ones from the café. It reached her eyes differently. "That's a very Mia way to come back," she said, even though she'd only met Mia 20 minutes ago. "Yeah," Owen said. "It really is." They spent 4 hours at the museum. Owen pushed Lily on the spinning gravity chair while Mia explained, with great authority, the physics of how it worked, which she had read about somewhere and retained completely accurately. Lily laughed, soundless, open-mouthed, head thrown back, and Owen caught Victoria looking at her niece with something in her expression that was so close to grief, it took him a moment to recognize it was also love. Sometimes those things live right next to each other. In the space exhibit, Lily found a display about the light delay from distant stars. The idea that when you look at a star, you're seeing light that left it thousands of years ago, that what you're seeing might not even exist anymore. And she stood in front of it for a long time. Mia stood beside her. Neither of them typed anything. They just looked. Owen stood a little way back with Victoria. "She loves that one," Victoria said quietly. "We came here once before." She stood there for 20 minutes. "It's a big idea," Owen said. "She's a big idea person," Victoria said. "Always has been. Since she was 2 years old, she'd look at things and you could just..." She stopped, started again. "You could tell she was having thoughts about them. Real thoughts. You just couldn't always hear them." Owen looked at Victoria. She was watching Lily and Mia at the exhibit, and her face had the particular vulnerability of someone who has let their guard down in a public place and hasn't noticed yet. He didn't say anything. Sometimes the right thing is to just let a moment be what it is. By November, Owen had learned 17 signs. He hadn't announced this. He hadn't made a thing of it. He downloaded an app on his commute, watched tutorials during lunch breaks, practiced in the bathroom mirror in the evenings after Mia was asleep, feeling mildly ridiculous and pressing on anyway. The 17th sign he learned was, "I understand," because it seemed useful, something a person might need to say. The 18th was, "I'm here," for the same reason. He wasn't keeping count exactly. It was just that some things you notice when you're paying attention, and Owen was paying attention. The situation with Victoria's sister had not been explained to him in full, but he was beginning to understand the shape of it. Kara, he'd heard the name spoken once, always with a particular tightening around Victoria's eyes, had a long history of disappearances. Weeks where she went unreachable. Periods where she surfaced, made promises, broke them. Lily had been living with Victoria for the past 4 months. Theoretically temporarily, the way things are always theoretically temporary until they aren't. Owen didn't push. But he started showing up, not in a grand way. He stopped by on a Saturday when Victoria mentioned the drawer was still sticking, and he fixed it in 11 minutes with a plane and 2 screws, and then he also looked at the cabinet above the sink that was slightly off its hinge, and fixed that too, because it was bothering him. Victoria stood in the kitchen doorway watching him and said, "You didn't have to do that." And he said, "I know." And that was the end of it. He took Lily to the park one afternoon when Victoria had a call she couldn't reschedule. He'd borrowed Mia's phone for the ASL app, and they'd communicated in a slow, imperfect combination of signs, typed messages, and occasional charades that should have been frustrating and was instead, somehow, kind of excellent. Lily had opinions about pigeons. Specifically, she did not trust them. And she had communicated this with great clarity and a series of signs that Owen suspected she'd invented on the spot. He'd texted Victoria after. "Park was good. Your niece has very sophisticated views on pigeons." Victoria had sent back 3 laughing emojis, which Owen had noted because she was not, generally speaking, an emoji person. The night things shifted. The night Owen understood that whatever this was had moved past the territory of careful, getting to know you, let's see how this goes, was a Thursday in late November, after a dinner at Victoria's apartment that had started as takeout and turned into something longer. Mia and Lily were in the living room. Mia had, at some point in the preceding weeks, decided that learning sign language was her personal mission, and she'd downloaded 4 separate apps and was now, by Owen's estimation, roughly 3 times better at it than he was, because she was 8 and had no ego about being a beginner. Owen was in the kitchen helping Victoria with dishes. Or more accurately, he was drying dishes while Victoria washed them, which was a division of labor that had happened naturally without discussion, the way domestic logistics sometimes settle themselves when 2 people have been around each other enough. Victoria said, without looking up from the sink, "She asked me today if we were a family." Owen set down the plate he was holding. "Lily?" he said. "Yeah." Victoria's hands were still in the soapy water. She didn't sign it. She wrote it on the whiteboard. She has this little whiteboard on her nightstand that she uses for the things she wants to take more time with. A pause. She wrote, "Are we a family now?" "What did you say?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I said yes, because—" She stopped, started again. "Because what was I supposed to say? No, you're here temporarily while we wait for your mother to get her life together. That's not—" Her voice was even, the kind of even that takes effort. "I couldn't say that." "You said yes," Owen said. "I said yes." She finally looked at him. Her expression was tired and careful, and something else, something underneath the control, something that was working very hard not to crack. And then she asked if you were part of it. The kitchen was very quiet. "What did you say to that?" Owen asked. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the sink. "I said I didn't know," she said. "But I wanted to." Owen picked up the plate again, dried it, set it on the stack. "Tell her yes," he said. Victoria's hand stilled in the water. "Owen, you can tell her yes," he said again. Steady, not pushing, just there. The way he'd been there, he realized, for weeks now, not announcing it, not asking for anything in return, just showing up and being useful and paying attention. "If that's what you want." The silence stretched out for a moment that felt longer than it probably was. Then Victoria said, very quietly, "That's what I want." He reached past her to put the plate in the cabinet. Their arms brushed. Neither of them moved away. In the living room, he could hear Mia and Lily. Mia narrating something in both voice and sign, probably telling one of her stories, the ones she told with her whole body. He could hear the scratch of Lily's marker on the whiteboard. He could hear the ordinary sound of an evening, the kind of sound that is unremarkable only until it isn't. Owen had been a single father for 3 years. He knew what an ordinary evening sounded like. He knew what it sounded like when one was actually good. This one was actually good. December arrived the way it always did in the city. Not gently, not with any particular fanfare, just a Tuesday morning when Owen stepped outside and the cold hit differently than it had the day before. Sharper. The kind of cold that makes you aware of your own face. He stood on the front steps of his building for a moment, coffee in hand, and did the mental arithmetic that he'd gotten good at over the years. Mia's lunch in her backpack, check. Permission slip for the science club field trip, signed and tucked in the front pocket, check. Pick up at 3:15 from Mrs. Caldwell because he had a job walkthrough at 3, check. He ran through it the way he ran through every morning, efficiently, without sentiment, because sentiment was a luxury you rationed when you were doing the whole thing alone. He thought about Victoria. He did that more now. Not obsessively, not the way he had in the early weeks when every thought of her felt slightly embarrassing, like getting caught staring. More like the way you think about weather, practically, with some awareness that it had a direct effect on how your day was going to go. She had texted him the night before. Late again. She was almost always late to text, because her days ran over their edges the way rivers run over banks in spring, not dramatically, just constantly. The message had been short. Kara called. Can't talk tonight. Sorry. That was all. But Owen had been paying attention long enough to know what wasn't in the message. No details, no explanation, just the name and the apology and the implicit weight of both. He'd typed back, "Okay, I'm here if you need anything." And then he'd put the phone down and stared at the ceiling for a while. The name Kara existed in his understanding of Victoria's life, the way a bruise exists on skin. You couldn't see it directly, but you knew where not to press. He learned more about her gradually, the way you learn most true things about people, not from what they tell you directly, but from what they don't tell you, and what they accidentally reveal in the spaces between. Victoria's older sister was 34 years old and had been, by all accounts, a person of enormous vitality and disaster in roughly equal measure. She had Lily at 28, a situation that had been both complicated and not entirely planned, with a man who had exited the picture so completely that Owen had never heard his name mentioned once. For the first 2 years of Lily's life, Kara had been, as Victoria described it, once, sitting at the kitchen table after Lily was asleep, with the particular flatness of tone that meant she was working hard to stay level, trying, really trying, appointments and routines and learning to communicate with her daughter in the language Lily needed, learning ASL badly and slowly and with real effort, because Kara at her best was someone who would throw herself into something completely. The problem was that Kara at her worst was a different person entirely. There had been a series of events. Owen never got the full picture, because Victoria only offered pieces of it, never the whole, that had escalated over the past 2 years. A disappearance in the spring. Lily found by a neighbor, alone in the apartment for almost a day. Victoria flying in from a business trip she couldn't afford to leave, carrying the kind of fury that comes from fear that has curdled. An agreement, a plan, supervised visits and a therapist and a support structure that had held, more or less until it didn't. The current arrangement, Lily living with Victoria, theoretically until Kara stabilized, had been in place since July. It was now December. Victoria had not said in so many words that she didn't believe the situation was temporary anymore. But Owen had watched her rearrange her entire life around a 6-year-old without complaint, without fanfare, without asking anyone to notice. And he thought he understood the shape of what she already knew, but wasn't ready to say out loud. He was on a job site the following Thursday, a residential renovation in the Wicker Park neighborhood, a kitchen gut job that had revealed approximately 3 separate generations of questionable electrical work, when Victoria called. Not texted. Called. He stepped outside into the cold, away from the noise of the crew. "Hey," he said. "Everything okay?" "Not exactly." Her voice was the controlled kind, the kind she used when something was wrong and she was managing it. "Lily's school called this morning. There was an incident." Owen waited. "She threw something," Victoria said. "A book. In the middle of class. No warning, no apparent trigger, just threw it, and then sat in the corner and wouldn't move for an hour." A pause. "This is not like her. She doesn't do things like this. She's—" Another pause, shorter. "She got a voicemail this morning from Kara. I didn't realize Kara had the school's secondary contact number. She left a message on the family line that the school forwarded. Lily heard it." "What was on it?" "She said she was coming to get her, that she'd been working on things, that she was better now, that she was going to come get Lily for Christmas." Victoria's voice was completely flat. It wasn't a mean message. The problem isn't that Kara wants her daughter. The problem is that she says this and then she doesn't come, and Lily knows that pattern. Lily has been living inside that pattern for 2 years, and apparently even hearing her mother's voice is enough to... She stopped. Owen was quiet for a moment. The wind off the street was sharp, and he turned away from it. "Where's Lily now?" he asked. "I picked her up. She's home. She's been in her room since noon. She won't open the door." "Has she responded to anything? Texts on the whiteboard app?" "She's read them. Blue check marks. Not responding." Owen looked at his watch. "I can be there in 40 minutes, he said. "I have to brief the crew foreman first, but..." "Owen, you don't have to..." 40 minutes, he said, and hung up. He got there in 35, which meant he'd driven faster than he should have and hit 2 yellow lights going orange, neither of which he was going to mention. Victoria buzzed him up without saying anything on the intercom. When he reached the apartment, the door was already unlocked. He let himself in. The apartment was quiet. Victoria was standing in the hallway, still in her coat, like she'd been pacing, and paused when she heard him at the door. She looked, in the most precise sense of the word, wrung out. Not crying, Owen had the strong impression that Victoria did not cry easily or often, but the kind of exhaustion that lives right underneath tears. "She's in there," Victoria said, nodding toward the short hallway that led to the apartment's second bedroom, the one that had been reassigned gently and without ceremony to Lily sometime around August. That bedroom had started its life as Victoria's home office and was now technically still a home office, except that a daybed and a lamp shaped like a giraffe and a small basket of art supplies had migrated in, and the whiteboards leaned against the wall where the filing cabinet used to be. Owen walked down the hallway and sat down on the floor outside the bedroom door. Not right in front of it, slightly to the side, like he was just resting there, like it wasn't about the door at all. He took out his phone, opened the ASL app out of habit, then put it away, because this wasn't that kind of moment. Then he opened his messages and typed to Lily's tablet number, which Victoria had given him 2 months ago. "Hey, I'm sitting in the hallway, no reason, just wanted you to know I was here." He waited. 2 minutes passed. 3. Then from under the door a piece of paper slid out. Owen picked it up. It was a page torn from a sketchbook. Lily was always drawing, and on it, in Lily's careful handwriting, were 3 words: "She's not coming." He looked at it for a long moment, then he turned it over and wrote on the back, "I know." He slid it back under the door. Another minute. 2. The door opened. Lily was standing in the doorway in socks and the oversized sweater she wore when she was upset. He'd learned this, that the oversized sweater meant something, with her sketchbook clutched to her chest and her eyes red at the edges, though not wet. She looked at him with the expression she had when she was deciding something. He didn't say anything. He just moved over slightly to make room. She came and sat beside him in the hallway, her back against the wall, her sketchbook on her knees. She opened it to a blank page and wrote, "She said she was coming for Christmas." "I heard," Owen said. She wrote, "She says things." "Yeah." She looked at what she'd written. Then she wrote underneath it, "And then they don't happen." Owen sat with that for a second. He wasn't a therapist. He wasn't going to tell her things would be fine because he didn't know if they would be, and Lily was too sharp for comfortable lies. He was just going to be in the hallway. "Can I see what you were drawing?" he asked. She hesitated. Then she tilted the sketchbook toward him. It was a house, detailed, in pencil, a front door, windows with curtains, a tree in the yard. Not realistic exactly, more the way a child imagines a house to be, but also specific. The curtains had a particular pattern. There was a mailbox. There was, Owen noticed, a light on in one of the upstairs windows. "That's a good house," he said. She looked at the drawing. Then she wrote, "It's not real." "Not yet," Owen said. She looked at him. He wasn't sure if she'd take that the right way or if it was the wrong thing to say. He was never completely sure with Lily, and he'd made peace with that uncertainty because the alternative was saying nothing, which was worse. But she looked at the drawing again, and something in her face shifted. Just slightly, just enough. Victoria appeared at the end of the hallway. She'd taken off her coat. She looked at the two of them on the floor, and her expression did something complicated and quiet, like a sentence that doesn't quite get finished. Owen looked up at her. She looked back at him. Neither of them said anything. Lily, without looking up from her sketchbook, reached over and patted Owen's knee twice. A gesture that was so matter-of-fact, so entirely unsentimental, that it took him a second to process it. Then she went back to drawing. He stayed on the floor for another hour. After Lily was asleep that night, an earlier night than usual, the kind of sleep that comes from emotional exhaustion, the body making decisions the mind won't. Owen and Victoria sat at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea neither of them was drinking. "I talked to my attorney today," Victoria said. Owen looked at her. Informal conversation. Just getting the lay of the land. She turned her cup around in her hands. "Apparently the temporary guardianship I have right now is exactly what it sounds like. Temporary. If Kara decides she's stable enough to make a claim, legally she has the stronger position. She's the mother." A pause. "Which is right. That's how it should work. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that every time she calls, every time she says she's coming, that's not just a broken promise to Lily. It's also potentially..." She stopped. She could walk in and take her. If she got herself together enough to convince a judge. She could. Owen wrapped his hands around his own cup. Is that what you think is going to happen? Victoria was quiet for a moment. I think, she said carefully, that Kara loves Lily, genuinely. And I think that love doesn't mean she's capable of being what Lily needs. And I think those two things are both true, and they don't cancel each other out. And that's the part that nobody seems to have a good answer for. Owen thought about his own divorce, about the specific misery of watching someone who loved Mia make choices that hurt her anyway, about the fact that love, by itself, was not a plan. What do you want to do? He asked. She looked at him. It was a direct question, and she wasn't used to being asked it. He could tell by the slight pause before she answered, the way her eyes moved to the middle distance for a second, like she was checking the question for traps. I want to make sure she's okay, Victoria said. That's it. That's the whole thing. She put the cup down. I want her to have a room that's actually her room. I want her to stop drawing houses that aren't real. She stopped herself. Then quietly, I want someone else to care what happens to her besides me. The sentence sat between them. Owen didn't look away. Someone else does, he said. Victoria's jaw tightened slightly. Not with anger, with the effort of not saying something, or maybe with the effort of believing something. He wasn't sure which. She looked down at the table. I don't know how to do this, she said. She said it without preface, without building up to it, just said it plainly, like it was a fact she'd been sitting on for months. I run a company. I manage 50 employees. I have made decisions involving several $100 million, and I did not lose sleep over them. But this, she gestured slightly toward the hallway where Lily's door was closed. I don't know how to do this without getting it wrong. Nobody knows how to do this without getting it wrong, Owen said. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be reassuring, he said. It was meant to be true. She looked at him again. And again he had that feeling then, the one from the café and the museum and the kitchen with the dishes, that she was measuring something, not him exactly, more like the space between them, deciding how much of it was safe to close. I'm tired, Owen, she said, very simply. No performance in it. Just a statement of fact from someone who had been carrying things for a long time and was, for a moment, setting one of them down. I know, he said. I don't want you to fix it, she said. I know that's probably what men do. Try to fix things. I'm not saying that as a criticism, I'm not going to try to fix it, he said. She looked at him. I'm just going to keep showing up, he said. That's all I've got. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the city made its ambient noise, traffic and wind, and the far-off sound of a train. Victoria looked at her cup of tea. She nodded, once, like she was accepting a practical arrangement, but her shoulders were slightly less set than they'd been when he walked in. He noticed that. Christmas arrived, and Kara did not. Owen had known, probably, that this was how it would go. He suspected Victoria had known too, in the way you know things you can't say out loud without making them real. But knowing something and living through it are different weights, and he watched Victoria live through it with the kind of particular competence she brought to everything. The presents under the tree, the special breakfast with Mia and Lily both, the paper crowns from the Christmas crackers that Mia had insisted on ordering online because she'd seen them in a movie and decided they were essential. It was a good day. Owen was sure of that. Lily had laughed 3 times before noon, genuine, soundless laugh, head back. Mia had given her a handmade card that was written entirely in ASL letters, spelled out in drawings, which had taken her, she informed everyone, basically my whole Thanksgiving break. The card contained several jokes that Owen did not fully understand, but that Lily clearly did, because she'd read it twice and kept it on the table beside her plate. But there was a moment, just one, in the middle of the afternoon when Lily went to the window and stood there looking out at the street. She stood there for a long time, longer than made sense for just looking at the view. And Owen watched Victoria watch her, and the expression on Victoria's face was one of the more complicated things he'd ever seen on a human face. Love and grief and fury and a very old, very tired resignation, all at the same time, held together by sheer willpower. He went and stood beside Victoria. He didn't say anything. He just put his hand over hers where it was resting on the back of the couch. She turned her hand over and held his. They stood like that while Lily looked out the window, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. And then Lily turned back from the window, looked at Owen and Victoria standing there, and signed something. Owen caught two of the signs, family and here. He looked at Victoria. She translated very quietly. She said the family that's here is the one that counts. Owen had to look at the ceiling for a second. Yeah, he said. Smart kid. I know, Victoria said. Her voice was completely steady, but her hand held on. January was hard in the way that Januaries after good Decembers always are. The cold without the festivity, the ordinary logistics of life reassembling themselves after a pause. Owen went back to full schedule at work, which meant early mornings and long days, and the particular physical tiredness of construction work, the kind that lives in your shoulders and lower back. Mia went back to school and resumed her campaign to become the most knowledgeable person in the science club, a goal she was pursuing with characteristic single-mindedness. Victoria went back to work too, which meant she was up before Lily and often not home until after. She had a system, a rotating combination of a morning nanny who brought Lily to school and picked her up, and a backup plan, and a backup to the backup. The architecture of a single woman who had incorporated a child into a life that hadn't been built for one, and was making it work through sheer organizational precision and a refusal to admit when something was stretched too thin. Owen saw the stretched too thin parts. He started coming by on Tuesday evenings. Nothing official, nothing discussed, just a pattern that emerged. He'd bring dinner, usually something simple, because elaborate cooking required time nobody had. Mia came too, most weeks, which meant Lily had company, which meant Victoria had 45 minutes where she could sit at the kitchen table and exist without performing competence for anyone. One Tuesday in late January, he arrived to find Victoria on the phone in the kitchen, speaking in the low, controlled voice she used for conversations that required maximum precision. He and Mia let themselves in. He had a key now, something else that had happened without announcement, and Mia immediately went to find Lily. Owen set the food on the counter and waited. He could hear enough to understand the shape of the call. Legal. Something about documentation, something about timelines. The word petition once, which tightened something in his chest. When she hung up, she sat down at the table with the phone still in her hand and looked at the middle distance for a moment that was slightly longer than comfortable. What happened? He asked. She put the phone face down on the table. Kara's attorney reached out to my attorney, she said. Apparently, Kara has been in a program for the past 6 weeks, residential treatment. She's saying she's going to petition for custody when she completes it. Owen sat across from her. The attorney says the timeline is probably 4 to 6 months, Victoria said. If she completes the program and has stable housing and can demonstrate a changed circumstance. She stopped. Which she should do. I want her to do that. I want Kara to get well. She pressed her fingers to her forehead. That's the right outcome. I know that. But, Owen said, but Lily has been living here for 6 months. She has a school, a therapist, a routine. She has... Victoria's voice didn't break, but it changed slightly, a hairline fracture in the evenness. She has a room. Owen looked around the apartment. He looked down the hallway toward the bedroom that was technically still a home office, but wasn't. Not really. Not anymore. Can I see it? He asked. Victoria looked at him. Her room? Yeah. She frowned slightly. Not suspicion, just uncertainty about the question. Sure. Why? I want to look at something, he said. The room was small. That was the truth of it, the architectural truth that had always been slightly papered over by the daybed and the lamp and the careful arrangement of Lily's things. It was a small room with one narrow window and a closet that had a door that didn't hang quite right on its frame, and the wall space was interrupted by the original shelving that had held Victoria's files and hadn't been fully removed. Owen stood in the doorway and looked at it with the specific eyes of someone who built things for a living. He looked at the window placement, the closet door, the shelving, the way the light came in. He measured things in his head, Not exactly, but close enough. Then he looked at Lily's drawings on the wall. She'd been allowed to tape them up, and there were probably 30 of them now, in various sizes, covering most of the space above the daybed. Houses and animals and what appeared to be a very detailed rendering of the Science Museum's space exhibit, with all the planets labeled in careful printing. In one corner, almost hidden by the shelf edge, was the drawing of the house with the light on in the upstairs window. He stood there for a long time. Victoria was behind him. "What are you looking at?" she said. "How much stuff is in the closet?" "Mostly my old filing, some boxes." "Can you move it into storage or—" "Yes, but—" She paused. "Owen, what are you thinking?" He turned around and looked at her. "I can build her a real room," he said. Victoria blinked. "Not a renovation, not a big thing," he said before she could object. "The shelving comes down, the closet gets cleared, I reconfigure the storage wall, put in a proper bed frame, built-in shelving that's actually hers, a desk space by the window." He paused. "It won't be a big room, but it'll be hers. Not a temporary arrangement, a real room." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was doing several things at once, and she seemed to be trying to settle it into something she could manage. "You can't just—" she started. "I can," he said. "That's literally what I do." "Owen, it's not about the custody situation," he said, cutting it clean. "Whatever happens with Kara, whatever the judge decides, Lily has been here 6 months, and she deserves a room that belongs to her for however long she's here. That's all this is, okay?" A long silence. "Okay," Victoria said, very quietly. "Good," he said. "I'll come Saturday. Bring the tools." He turned back to the room. In his mind, he was already measuring, already planning, already seeing the thing that wasn't there yet but could be. That was the part of his work he'd always loved. Not the finished thing, but the moment before it, when you understood exactly what the space needed and knew you could give it. He reached up and straightened one of Lily's drawings that had started to peel at the corner, pressed it back flat against the wall. Behind him, Victoria said nothing, but she didn't move away either. She just stood there in the doorway, watching him look at the room her niece had been sleeping in for 6 months. And something in the set of her shoulders changed. Not dramatically, not in a way she probably even noticed. Just a little lighter, just by a fraction. It was a start. He came on Saturday with his truck. Not a grand entrance, just Owen pulling up to the curb at 8:15 in the morning with a toolbox in the back and a bag of hardware from the supply house and a coffee that was already half gone. He'd been up since 6, which was not unusual for him, because his body had decided years ago that 6 was the appropriate time to be awake, regardless of what the rest of his life had planned. Victoria buzzed him up. When he got to the door, she was already dressed, which surprised him. He'd half expected her to answer in the same state of barely assembled that most people inhabited on Saturday mornings. But Victoria was in jeans and a gray pullover with her hair pulled back, and she had a cup of coffee ready for him on the counter, which she handed to him without preamble. "Lily's still asleep," she said. "She stays up late on Fridays." "I let her." "That's fine," Owen said. "I'll start with the shelving. It won't make much noise." He wasn't lying. Removing shelving was mostly careful work, unscrewing brackets and pulling units away from the wall with enough patience that the drywall didn't come with them. He went to work quietly, systematically, the way he'd learned to work in spaces where other people were living. Construction work at its best was supposed to be invisible. You came in, you changed a thing, you left it better than you found it, and the disruption was minimal. Victoria sat at the kitchen table with her own coffee and her laptop, doing the thing she always did on weekend mornings, working, but the lighter kind of working, the kind that didn't require phone calls or decisions, just reading and organizing and the administrative maintenance of a billion-dollar company that ran on her attention even on its quietest days. Owen worked. By 9:30, the shelving was down and stacked neatly in the hallway, and he was assessing the wall with a stud finder and a pencil. The room was noticeably larger without the shelving. Not large, but large enough. The light from the narrow window reached the far wall now, without anything interrupting it. He heard movement from the direction of Lily's, from the room, and then a small figure appeared in the doorway in socks and the oversized sweater, hair uncombed, holding her sketchbook against her chest, the way she always did first thing before she was fully awake and into the day. She looked at the room, at the bare walls where the shelving had been, at Owen crouched on the floor with a stud finder. She looked at him. He signed good morning, one of his better signs. He'd been practicing it specifically because it was the first thing. She signed it back. Then she looked at the walls again and at him, and she opened her sketchbook and wrote something and held it up. "What are you doing?" "Building you something," he said. She looked around the room again, doing the slow, methodical assessment that Owen had come to recognize as her version of thinking out loud. Then she wrote, "What kind of something?" "A better room," he said. "Your room." She lowered the sketchbook. She looked at the space around her. The bare walls, the window, the slightly too small daybed in the corner, with the expression she had when she was deciding whether to believe something. Then she climbed over his toolbox, which was directly in her path, and sat down cross-legged in the middle of the floor and opened her sketchbook to a new page. Owen watched her start to draw. "Are you designing it?" he asked. She nodded without looking up. "Okay," he said. "Tell me what you want." But she drew for 20 minutes while Owen worked around her. He was used to this, the way children occupied space. Not in spite of what was happening, but alongside it, parallel to it, their own concerns running on their own track. He'd raised Mia through 3 different apartment renovations and knew that the key was to make them feel like the space was being changed for them, not around them. When Lily finished, she turned the sketchbook around and showed him. It was detailed. More detailed than he expected. She'd been thinking about this room, he realized, longer than just the 20 minutes. She'd drawn the window with a built-in seat beneath it, the kind with storage underneath the cushion. She'd drawn shelves on the wall opposite the door at different heights, the lower ones reachable for her. She'd drawn a desk that fit in the corner by the closet, and on the wall above where the bed would be, she'd drawn not art, not posters, just a painted section of wall in a different color, one rectangle of color in a sea of white. Owen looked at it for a long time. "The window seat," he said. "That's a good call." She nodded. "The shelves, I can do exactly like that." He traced the drawing with his finger. "Varying heights, lower ones here. Yeah." He looked at the corner she'd designated for the desk. "This might be slightly tighter than you drew it, but it'll work." He looked at the painted rectangle. "What color?" She thought about it. Then she wrote, "Blue, but not baby blue, the other kind." "Navy?" he said. She shook her head. "Teal?" She tilted her hand back and forth. "Closer." He pulled out his phone, went to a paint swatch website, and handed it to her. She scrolled through with the focused intensity she brought to all things, and then stopped and showed him the phone. It was a specific shade, somewhere between ocean blue and slate, with just enough gray in it to feel serious rather than decorative. Owen looked at it and thought that it was a very considered choice for a 6-year-old. "Good color," he said. She looked pleased. Not the performing pleasure kind of pleased, just the satisfied kind, the kind that comes from being understood. "Hush." Victoria appeared in the doorway around 10, holding a refill of coffee and wearing an expression that was caught between amusement and something more complicated. "Are you two designing this together?" she asked. Lily showed her the sketchbook drawing. Victoria looked at it. Then she looked at Owen. Then back at the drawing. "You drew the window seat," she said to Lily. "I thought you might want one." Lily wrote, "I've wanted one for a long time." Victoria was quiet for a second. Her voice, when she spoke, was carefully even. "Why didn't you say so?" Lily looked at her. She wrote, slowly, "I didn't know if I was staying long enough for it to matter." The room went very still. Owen kept his eyes on the wall he was measuring. He heard Victoria exhale. Just once, just a small sound, and then heard her move across the room and sit down on the floor beside Lily, which she did without any preamble, without making it into a thing. "You're staying," Victoria said, "for as long as you need to. You know that." Lily looked at her. Then she wrote, "What if Mom comes back?" "Then we'll figure it out," Victoria said. "Together. But right now this is your room, and you're going to have a window seat." Lily looked at Owen. He looked up from the wall. "Going to need someone to help me pick the wood for the seat," he said. "You interested?" She considered this with great seriousness. Then she nodded. "Good," he said. "We'll go to the lumberyard this afternoon. They have samples." He came back 4 Saturdays in a row. The first Saturday was demo and framing, getting the shelving out, assessing the closet situation, discovering that there was an old electrical junction behind where the built-in used to be that needed to be properly boxed before anything else happened. That added half a day and a trip to the hardware store and a conversation with Victoria about permits, which he handled without burdening her with the details. The second Saturday was framing the window seat and building the desk unit in the corner, which he did in his shop during the week. Evenings, after Mia was in bed, in the garage space he rented in his building's basement. He worked by himself in the quiet of late night, sawdust in his hair, measuring twice the way his father had taught him before his father stopped being someone who taught him things. He thought, while he worked, about Lily drawing houses that weren't real. He thought about what it meant to build a thing for someone who had learned not to expect things. He thought about Victoria saying, "I don't know how to do this without getting it wrong." He thought about the fact that this was, in his experience, roughly what parenthood felt like every day, and that the absence of certainty didn't mean the absence of capability. You didn't know. You showed up anyway. You tried to build something solid enough to matter. The third Saturday was installation. The desk unit, the shelving, the window seat frame. Lily sat on the finished window seat frame for 10 minutes before the cushion arrived, just sat there with her knees up in her sketchbook, looking out the narrow window at the street below with an expression that was so entirely private that Owen deliberately didn't look at it for more than a second. The fourth Saturday was paint. Owen had offered to do this part himself, but Mia had heard about the room and declared, with characteristic authority, that she was coming and that she was helping paint, and this had been communicated to Lily via text. And Lily had responded with 3 exclamation marks, which from Lily was essentially the equivalent of a parade. So the fourth Saturday was Owen and Mia and Lily, and eventually Victoria, who had planned to observe and had ended up with paint on her forearm by 11 in the morning, which Lily had found extremely funny. The color went up in long strokes on the accent wall. That specific shade, the one between ocean and slate. And it was slightly darker than Owen had expected from the swatch, which sometimes happened, but it looked, he thought, exactly right for the room. Serious and warm at the same time. The kind of color that a person could look at for a long time without getting tired of it. Mia and Lily painted the trim, which was the kind of task that sounds simple and isn't, and there were some sections that would require touching up. And there was a moment when Mia misjudged a corner, and there was a streak of blue across approximately 12 inches of the white adjacent wall, which Lily found so funny she couldn't breathe. Owen painted over the streak. He did not make a thing of it. By 4 in the afternoon, the room was finished. Not in the magazine sense of finished. It was a small room with one good window, and the new shelves were solid but not custom cabinetry, and the desk was well built but simple, and the accent wall was beautiful in the particular imperfect way that hand-painted things always are. But it was real. It was Lily's. The window seat had a cushion in a fabric she'd chosen, a warm gray with tiny dark blue dots. And there was a lamp Owen had mounted on the shelf above it that she could turn on and off with the switch beside the window. Lily stood in the doorway and looked at it for a long time. Mia stood beside Owen behind her, also looking. Then Mia quietly signed something to Lily. Owen caught beautiful and yours and something he didn't know. Lily turned around. Her eyes were wet, not crying. She held it in the way she held most things, with a precision that shouldn't be possible in a 6-year-old, but wet. She looked at Owen. He'd been thinking about what to say, or whether to say anything. He landed on, "It's yours," which was almost exactly what Mia had signed, but sometimes repetition is the point. Lily nodded. Then she crossed the room, put the sketchbook on the window seat, in the corner, the specific corner where the light was best, and sat down. She looked out the window. Victoria was leaning against the doorframe. Owen came and stood beside her. "You did this," she said, quietly, not making it into a declaration, just saying the thing. "She designed it," Owen said. "I just built it." Victoria looked at him sideways. She had paint on her forearm and one streak of it in her hair that she hadn't noticed yet. And she looked more tired than usual, and also, somehow, more herself than he'd ever seen her. Less performed, less buttoned up against the possibility of something going wrong. "Owen," she said. "Yeah." "Thank you." She said it the way she said most important things, directly, without dressing it up. "Not just for the room." He didn't say "you're welcome" because it felt wrong for the moment. He just nodded, and they stood together in the doorway, watching Lily sit at her window with her sketchbook open, drawing something in the late afternoon light. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Owen wasn't there when it came. He found out that evening, when Victoria called him, and her voice had the particular quality it got when she was managing something large. He could hear it in the first syllable of his name. "Kara's attorney sent formal notice today," she said. "She's completed the residential program. She's requesting a hearing to modify the guardianship arrangement. They're calling it a reunification petition." Owen sat down on the edge of his bed. Mia was in the other room doing homework. The apartment was the ordinary quiet of a weekday evening. "When?" he asked. "The hearing's in 6 weeks." A pause. "My attorney says we have options. We can contest the modification, present evidence of established care, Lily's documented adjustment to this environment. There's a process." Another pause. "But Owen, if Kara has genuinely completed treatment, if she has stable housing and can demonstrate she's different, the court is going to give her serious consideration. She's the mother." "I know," Owen said. "And she should get consideration," Victoria said. And he could hear the specific tension of someone who believed this and was also quietly devastated by it. "That's the right thing. I know that's the right thing. I just—" She stopped. "What?" he said. "I don't know how Lily is going to survive another round of hope," Victoria said. Her voice didn't break, but it landed differently than her usual words, more exposed. "She's been through this. She's been through Kara saying she's better, and then she isn't, and then Lily has to—" She stopped again. "I'm not going to tell her about the hearing yet. I can't watch her go through that again without knowing if that's the right call," Owen said. "She doesn't need to know yet. My attorney wants to meet next week. Go over the documentation." Victoria paused. I know this is a lot to ask, but I might need you to be available, to talk to the attorney about Lily's life here, the routine, She stopped again. "You don't have to. This isn't your legal situation. I know that." He was quiet for a second. "What time does the attorney meet?" he asked. "Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock. "I'll move a job walkthrough," he said. "Owen?" "I'll move it," he said again. "It's fine." The silence on the line was the kind that held something in it. Not emptiness, but weight. After a moment, Victoria said, "Okay," and the word had more in it than its 4 letters could technically hold. He met with the attorney. Thursday. Her name was Renata Flores, and she was thorough in the way that good attorneys are. She asked direct questions and listened to the answers without filling the silences. And she wrote things down and then asked follow-up questions that made it clear she'd processed everything the first time. She asked Owen about his relationship to Lily. He answered honestly, thus, that he wasn't a relative, wasn't a legal anything, that he was involved in both girls' lives as a consistent presence. She asked how long. He calculated 4 months of real regularity, though the initial meeting had been 2 months before that. And in that time, Renata said, what has Lily's adjustment looked like? Owen thought about the hallway, the piece of paper under the door. She's not coming. He thought about the pigeon opinions in the park, about the sketchbook full of houses, about the moment she'd taken his hand at the café like it was simply the logical thing to do. She's settled, he said. She's got routines, relationships, a school she's comfortable in. She's in a good pattern with her therapist. She communicates more than she did in the fall. She takes more risks with it, I mean. She'll try things she isn't sure will land. He paused. She laughs more. Renata wrote something down, then she looked up. Mr. Hayes, I want to be direct with you about something. Go ahead, Owen said. The petitioner, Ms. Ashford's sister, has completed a 60-day residential program, which is significant. Her attorney is prepared to argue that she has demonstrated meaningful change. Courts in this jurisdiction lean toward parental reunification when there's evidence of genuine rehabilitation, and the evidence she has is not nothing. Renata set down her pen. What I'm telling you is that this isn't a case where we can simply demonstrate that Lily is doing well here. We need to show that stability and continuity of care constitute a compelling countervailing interest, and part of that depends on how substantial the web of relationships around Lily actually is. She looked at him steadily. I'm not a part of the family, Owen said. No, Renata agreed, but families aren't only defined by paperwork. In custody and guardianship proceedings, courts do consider the totality of a child's support network. She paused. I'm not asking you to commit to anything. I'm explaining the landscape. Owen sat with that on the train home. He sat with the specific sensation of a situation reaching toward him, asking him how serious he was, asking him to decide how far he was willing to go into someone else's chaos. He thought about Victoria's face when she talked about Lily's hope, about the drawing of the house with the light on upstairs, about the window seat, and Lily sitting at it in the late afternoon, drawing. He thought about what it meant to show up, whether there was a version of showing up that was also, at some point, just the thing you did because you didn't know how to do otherwise. He got off the train. He picked up Mia from Mrs. Caldwell's. He made dinner, pasta, Tuesday's dinner, even though it was Thursday, because some things are reliable on purpose. He didn't call Victoria that night. He sat on the edge of his bed after Mia was asleep, and he thought for a long time. The crisis came 3 weeks before the hearing, and it came, as crises usually do, without warning and at an inconvenient hour. It was a Tuesday evening, one of his regular dinner nights, and the four of them were in the middle of eating when Victoria's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her face went a particular kind of still. I have to take this, she said. She pushed back from the table and went into the kitchen. Mia and Lily continued eating. Owen listened to the low murmur of Victoria's voice through the wall without being able to make out words, but he could hear the register of it, controlled, but barely. She was back in 8 minutes. She sat down at the table and put her phone face down beside her plate and didn't immediately pick up her fork. Everything okay? Owen said. She looked at Lily for a second. Then she looked at Owen with an expression that was asking him something without words. He looked at Mia. Hey Mia, can you show Lily that thing on your phone? The video we watched last week? Mia looked at him, did the quick calculation, and picked up her phone. Oh yeah, it's this. Here. She showed the screen to Lily, who leaned in, and within 30 seconds both of them were absorbed in whatever it was. Owen looked at Victoria. She leaned slightly forward, her voice low. Kara called me directly, not through the attorney. Directly. My personal cell. She paused. She sounded... Another pause. Longer. She was coherent. She wasn't... I don't think she was using. She sounded like herself. The version of herself that's together. A pause. She asked if she could come. Here. Not a visit, not a formal meeting. She just said she wanted to see the apartment. She said she wanted to see where Lily was living. Owen waited. I said no, Victoria said. I told her it had to go through Renata. She got... Victoria's jaw tightened. She got upset. She said I was keeping her away from her own daughter. She said I was using the legal process to... She stopped. She said some things. And I stayed calm, and I said she needed to call her attorney, and I hung up. Okay, Owen said. She called back 3 times, Victoria said. I didn't answer. Okay, Owen said again. Victoria put her hands flat on the table. She's not wrong that I'm using the legal process, she said, with the precision of someone who had been thinking about this. That's exactly what I'm doing, because it's the only protection Lily has. But Kara isn't... She's not a monster. She's a person who has a serious problem and has apparently been working on it. And I'm sitting here using lawyers to keep her from her daughter, and I don't know... She stopped. I don't know if I'm protecting Lily or if I'm... You're doing both, Owen said. She looked at him. You're protecting Lily and it's also complicated, he said. Those 2 things can be true at the same time. You know that. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in her face that she didn't quite let surface all the way. She's going to show up, Victoria said, at the hearing. And Lily's going to have to... We're going to have to tell Lily. Before the hearing. She has to know. When are you planning to tell her? Owen asked. I don't know. Her voice, for just a moment, was the voice of someone who had run out of the particular kind of strength that made decisions. I don't know how. Owen looked at Lily, who was watching Mia's phone screen with total absorption, her knee pulled up on the chair, completely contained in the present moment, the way only children can be. Completely unaware that 3 weeks from now, she would be sitting in a courthouse waiting to find out which version of the future was going to be her life. He thought about what Renata had said about the totality of a child support network. He thought about how he had come to be here, in this apartment, at this table, part of this particular configuration of people, not through any plan, not through any decision he'd consciously made, but through the incremental logic of showing up until showing up became who you were. Tell her together, Owen said. Victoria looked at him. Don't tell her alone, he said. Tell her with me there, with Mia there if she wants. She shouldn't hear something like that by herself. Victoria stared at him. And then, slowly, something in her expression came undone. Just slightly, just at the edges. The kind of thing that happens when someone has been holding something alone for so long that the offer of company is almost disorienting. You'd do that, she said. Not a question exactly, more like something she was testing the reality of. Yeah, Owen said. Obviously. The table was quiet. Across from them, Lily laughed silently at whatever was on Mia's screen, and the sound of it, or the absence of sound and the presence of her joy anyway, filled the room. Victoria picked up her fork. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't look like someone carrying the whole thing alone anymore. And that was different from 10 minutes ago, and Owen thought that different was enough for one Tuesday night. They told Lily on a Sunday morning, 2 weeks before the hearing. Owen was there, Mia was there, having been told just enough to understand that this was a serious morning and that her job was to be present and calm, which she did with a gravity that made Owen's chest ache in the specific proud way it did when his daughter exceeded the ordinary capacity of her 8 years. Victoria sat across from Lily at the kitchen table and told her, in a combination of speech and sign and written words on the whiteboard, that her mother had completed a program and wanted to come home, that there was a meeting, a hearing, in 2 weeks where people would talk about what was best for Lily, that Lily would be asked to talk to someone, a special kind of person called a guardian ad litem, whose job was to understand what Lily needed and to tell the court. Lily listened. She listened the way she always listened, absolutely, with her full attention, without interruption. Her face was very still. When Victoria finished, Lily sat for a moment. Then she picked up the whiteboard marker. She wrote, "Is she better this time?" Victoria looked at Owen. Owen looked at Victoria. "She's been working on it," Victoria said carefully. "We don't know yet." Lily looked at what she'd written. She erased it slowly and wrote something else. "What if I have to go back?" "Then we make sure you're safe," Victoria said. "That's what the hearing is for." Lily erased that too. She looked at the blank whiteboard for a moment. Then she wrote, "Will you still be here, both of you?" Owen leaned forward. "Yeah," he said. "We're not going anywhere, whatever happens." Lily looked at him for a long time. Then she put the cap on the marker and stood up from the table and walked to her room. The real room, the one with the window seat and the right shade of blue on the wall, and closed the door. Not a slam, just a close. The quiet kind that means I need a minute. Mia looked at Owen. He nodded toward the hallway. She got up from the table and went and sat down outside Lily's door, her back against the wall, in exactly the spot where Owen had sat on the day Lily threw the book. She pulled out her phone and started signing, slowly and carefully, through the door gap, to the camera she'd pointed at the narrow crack of light beneath it. Owen watched this for a moment. Then he looked at Victoria. She was looking at Mia in the hallway with the expression that was grief and love existing in the same space, and her hands were flat on the table, and she was working very hard to stay level. "Hey," Owen said. She looked at him. "She's not alone," he said. "She has never been alone in that room." Victoria nodded. Her jaw was tight with the effort of something. "You're not alone either," he said. She looked at him, and for a second, just a second, she let her face be exactly what it was, frightened and tired and grateful and completely unguarded. Then she looked back at her hands on the table. "I know," she said, and this time she meant it. In the hallway, Lily opened the door. She let Mia in. The week before the hearing, Owen slept badly. Not dramatically badly. Not the kind of insomnia that involves staring at the ceiling and cataloging regrets. More like the shallow, surface-level sleep of someone whose brain had decided that full unconsciousness was a luxury it couldn't currently afford. He'd wake at 2, 3, 4 in the morning with the specific alertness of a person who has something unresolved sitting in the middle of their chest, and he'd lie there for 20 minutes or half an hour until his body gave up and let him back under. He didn't tell Victoria this. She had enough of her own sleeplessness to manage. He knew she wasn't sleeping well either because her texts had started arriving earlier, 5:40, 5:50 in the morning, practical things mostly, logistics about the hearing schedule and what Lily should wear and whether Renata needed anything else from him before Thursday. The content was administrative, but the hour said everything. Victoria processed anxiety the way she processed everything, by converting it into tasks and completing them one at a time, and when there were no more tasks, by generating new ones. Owen answered every text. He kept his responses practical and calm because that was what was needed. And because one of the things he'd figured out about Victoria Ashford in 5 months was that she didn't want to be talked down from something. She wanted to be stood next to while she handled it. The guardian ad litem, a woman named Dr. Patricia Whelan, had met with Lily twice in the preceding 2 weeks. Owen had not been present for those meetings. His role was not that formal, not that defined. But Lily had told Mia about them afterward, via text, and Mia had reported to Owen with the thoroughness of someone who understood this information was important. She said the lady asked her what she liked about her room, Mia said on the Tuesday before the hearing. She was sitting at the kitchen counter while Owen made dinner in the way she often did, keeping him company without making a project of it. "What did Lily say?" Owen asked. "She said she likes the window seat because you can see the street, but you're also inside," Mia said. "And she likes the color because it looks different depending on the time of day, like it's a different blue in the morning than at night." Owen turned this over in his mind while he stirred. "She also said the lady asked her about you," Mia added, with the careful casualness of a child who has decided to share something significant and is monitoring the reaction. "What did she ask?" "She asked who was important to her, and Lily wrote down you and Victoria and me." A pause. "She wrote you first." Owen kept stirring. "Dad?" Mia said. "Yeah." "What's going to happen at the hearing?" He turned around and looked at his daughter. She was 8 years old, and she was asking a real question, and she deserved a real answer, not a managed one. "I don't know exactly," he said. "A judge is going to listen to everyone and decide what's best for Lily. And whatever the judge decides, Lily is going to be okay, because she has people who care about her." Mia looked at him with the expression she had when she was deciding whether an answer was sufficient. Then she said, "I know that. I meant what's going to happen with you and Victoria." Owen put the spoon down. "What do you mean?" he said. "I mean, are you going to make it official?" She said it with the slightly awkward directness of an 8-year-old who has been thinking about something for a while and has run out of patience for the indirect approach. Like, are you her boyfriend? Are you... "Mia, I'm just asking." He looked at her for a moment. "That's between me and Victoria," he said, "and we haven't had that conversation yet." "Why not?" "Because there have been other things to deal with first." Mia absorbed this. Then she said, "I think you should have the conversation after the hearing." She delivered this with the tone of someone tabling a motion, and then she picked up her tablet and returned to whatever she'd been doing before. And Owen turned back to the stove, and neither of them said anything else about it for the rest of the evening. But he thought about it. He'd been thinking about it. He'd been thinking about it since January, since the kitchen with the dishes, since the word want, since the specific gravity of a situation that had stopped being about being helpful and started being about something he couldn't quite put the right language to. He thought about what Mia had said, make it official, with the practical clarity of a child who saw the thing plainly and didn't understand why the adults were circling it. He thought, not for the first time, that 8-year-olds were sometimes the smartest people in the room. The courthouse was downtown, A gray stone building with wide steps and revolving doors, and the ambient smell of floor cleaner and institutional coffee that all public buildings seem to share. Owen had been in a courthouse once before, when his and Renata's marriage had been dissolved with the particular cold efficiency of a legal system that has processed thousands of identical heartbreaks and arrived at a standardized format for all of them. He hadn't been back since. He didn't have fond associations. He arrived at 8:45. Renata had said 9, but Owen was not a person who arrived on time. He arrived early and used the extra minutes to understand where he was. He stood near the entrance and watched the building fill up with people who all had their own versions of an unresolved thing sitting in their chests. And he thought about how many lives were being quietly changed in courtrooms today, in buildings like this one all over the city. Victoria arrived at 8:52 alone. Lily was not with her. Lily was coming separately, with Dr. Whelan, who would bring her in after the initial portion of the proceedings, which was how the court managed these situations to protect children from the opening arguments. Victoria had arranged for Mia to be at school, which had required a separate conversation with Mia, who had accepted this with more grace than Owen expected, and had sent Lily a long voice note in ASL that morning that Lily had listened to 3 times before leaving. Victoria walked up the courthouse steps in a dark coat and low heels, her hair down. He'd noticed she wore it down when she was bracing for something, like it was a small act of being herself against the formal occasion. She saw him, and something in her posture changed slightly, the way it did when she spotted something she'd been looking for. "You're early," she said. "So are you," he said. She stopped beside him. She looked at the building for a moment. "I hate this," she said. Not dramatically, just the fact. "Yeah," he said. "I know I said I had it handled. I know I said I was—" She stopped. "You are handling it," Owen said. "You've been handling it for months. That's different from being fine." She looked at him. Her expression was the open one, the less defended one, the one he'd started recognizing as what she actually looked like when she wasn't performing capability for anyone. "Renata says we have a strong position," she said. "Then trust Renata." "I do trust Renata." A pause. "I don't trust the variable of a judge I've never met making a decision about a 6-year-old who—" She stopped again. "Lily had a nightmare 2 nights ago. She came into my room at 2 in the morning and didn't want to go back to her room. She just sat on the edge of my bed for an hour. She didn't write anything. She didn't sign anything. She just sat there." Owen was quiet. "I sat with her," Victoria said. "Obviously. But I kept thinking, what happens in there today? Whatever the judge decides, Lily is the one who lives with it. Not Renata, not me, not—" She pressed her lips together. "She's 6. She didn't make any of the choices that led here. She's just—" "She's going to be okay," Owen said. Victoria looked at him with an expression that had some frustration in it. "You don't know that." "No," he agreed, "but I know her. And she's tougher than the situation she was born into. She was tougher than it at 6 months old, and she's tougher than it now." He held Victoria's gaze. "And she's not in it alone. That matters." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, the way she did when she was accepting a thing she didn't entirely want to accept. "Come on," Owen said. "Let's go in." Kara Ashford was already inside. Owen saw her across the lobby before Victoria did, which gave him approximately 2 seconds to prepare himself. He used those seconds to absorb the information. She was tall, like Victoria, same dark hair but shorter, wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit the way it was supposed to. She was standing with her attorney and holding a folder of documents with both hands, and she had the look of someone who had prepared very carefully for this moment and was now confronting the reality that preparation only goes so far. Then Victoria saw her. The 2 sisters looked at each other across the lobby of the courthouse, and the air between them was the specific kind of charged that only comes from a long, complicated history. Not hatred, not even anger exactly, just the accumulated weight of love and failure and loss and guilt that had been building for years and had no adequate container. Kara's attorney guided her toward the elevator. Kara moved, but she looked back at Victoria once, and the look on her face was the kind that Owen recognized. Not from courthouses, but from construction sites. From the moment right before a structure that has been compromised finally shows you exactly how compromised it is. It was the look of someone holding themselves together with the last of something. Victoria watched her sister disappear into the elevator. Then she turned and walked toward Renata, who was waiting by the check-in desk, and her face was completely composed. Owen followed. Get. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Owen was in the gallery, not a participant, not called as a witness in the formal proceeding, but present, which Renata had said was useful, and which Victoria had asked him specifically to do. He sat in the second row of the public gallery and listened to the legal architecture of Lily's situation being laid out in the careful, precise language of courts, which translated the messy human reality of everything that had happened into a structure of documented facts and demonstrated circumstances and legal standards. Renata presented Victoria's position: 6 months of continuous, stable care. Lily's documented improvement under the care of her therapist, Dr. Anisha Patel. The established school environment, the routine, the support network. The Guardian ad litem's report, which Owen could not see from where he sat, but which Renata referenced with the confidence of someone who had read it and knew it was useful. Kara's attorney presented his position. Completed residential treatment, 62 days. Current stable housing, documented. A 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood on the north side, lease signed, utilities in her name. Letters of support from her program counselors and her sponsorship network. Evidence of maintained sobriety for the duration of the program and for the 4 weeks since. And then Kara testified. She sat in the witness chair and she was, Owen searched for the right word and arrived at, present. Not polished, not performing recovery, not selling anything. She was present and she was honest and she was, he could see from where he sat, afraid. She talked about Lily's early years, about the signs that something was different and the process of understanding what that meant and learning how to reach her daughter in the way her daughter needed. She talked about the period when things went wrong, not minimizing it, not explaining it away, just describing it with the flat accuracy of someone who has spent time being honest about something painful. She talked about the program, about what she'd understood in the program, about the specific shape of her failure and what it had cost. And then she talked about Lily. She makes things, Kara said. Draws, builds, arranges. She's always been like that since she was a baby. She'd organize her blocks by color and then by size and then tear the whole thing down and start over. I used to watch her and think, she's figuring out the world right in front of me, just working out how it's put together. She paused. I haven't been able to give her what she needed. I know that. I know the last 2 years. I know what I cost her. I'm not asking for... She stopped. Started again. I love my daughter. I'm asking for the chance to prove that love is actually useful to her this time, not just real. Useful. The courtroom was quiet. Owen looked at Victoria. She was sitting at the table beside Renata, and her face was turned slightly away from him, but he could see her jaw from this angle, and the muscle in it that moved when she was holding something in. He thought about what she'd said in January, Kara loves Lily, genuinely. And I think that love doesn't mean she's capable of being what Lily needs. And I think those two things are both true, and they don't cancel each other out. The problem, the real problem, the one that no courtroom procedure fully resolved, was that they were still both true. And the judge was being asked to decide which truth was more important today, for this specific child, in this specific moment. And that was not a question with a clean answer, and everyone in the room knew it. Oh, Lily came in during the recess. Dr. Whelan brought her in through a side entrance and brought her to a separate room off the main corridor, where she would speak with the judge privately. A standard practice for children in these proceedings. The court's way of hearing what a child needed without the performance of the formal proceeding pressing down on them. Owen was in the hallway when they passed. Lily saw him. She stopped walking. Dr. Whelan paused. Lily looked at Owen for a moment. She was wearing a dark blue dress, the closest color she had to the shade on her bedroom wall, he noticed, and he couldn't be certain that was intentional, but he also couldn't believe it was accidental. She had her sketchbook under her arm. She walked over to him and held out her sketchbook. He took it, not sure what she meant. She opened it to a page and pointed. It was a drawing of 4 people. Not realistic. the abstract, indicative way she often drew people, shapes suggesting height and posture more than detail. But he could tell which one was supposed to be who, one tall and businesslike, one smaller with a ponytail, one small and serious with a sketchbook under her arm, and one, taller than the others, broad-shouldered, standing at the edge of the group with his hands in his pockets. They were all facing the same direction. At the top of the page, in Lily's careful handwriting, she'd written one word: home. Owen looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he looked at Lily. She watched him steadily, waiting for whatever his response was going to be. He handed the sketchbook back. Then he crouched down to her level, which he didn't always do, because she didn't always want the height adjusted, but today felt like today. And he signed, slowly and carefully, "We will be here. After. We will be here." Her face did the small thing it did when she believed something. Dr. Whelan guided her away. Owen stood up. He went back into the gallery. He sat down. He looked at the front of the courtroom and breathed slowly, and did not think about the drawing or what it meant, or what he was going to do about any of it, because none of that was useful right now. Right now, there was just the next hour. The judge's decision, when it came, was not a complete victory for anyone, which was, Renata said afterward, fairly typical. The modification was granted in part. Kara had demonstrated sufficient evidence of changed circumstances to warrant a transition plan. But the transition plan was exactly that: a plan with structure and timeline and conditions and court oversight. The current guardianship arrangement with Victoria would remain the primary arrangement for the next 90 days. During that period, Kara would have supervised visitation, weekly, 2 hours, at a neutral location with a social worker present. At the end of 90 days, there would be a review hearing, at which point the court would assess Kara's compliance with all conditions and determine whether and how to modify the arrangement further. It was not permanent. It was not finished. It was a 90-day answer to a question that would not be fully resolved today. Renata explained this to Victoria in the corridor after, with the precise, calm manner of someone who understood that the client needed information before emotion. Victoria listened. She nodded in the right places. She asked 2 clarifying questions about the conditions of Kara's supervised visits, about the documentation requirements for the review hearing. She did not cry. She did not express relief or despair. She thanked Renata, shook her hand, and watched her walk away. Then she turned to Owen, and for just a moment, her face was exactly what the afternoon had cost her. 90 days, she said. Yeah, he said. And then another hearing. Yeah. She looked at the corridor ceiling. Then she looked back at him. Is this better or worse than I think it is? He thought about it honestly. It's probably both, he said. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. Come on, he said. Let's get Lily. Lily was in the side room with Dr. Whelan when they came in, sitting on the carpet with her sketchbook open, drawing something. She looked up when the door opened. She saw Victoria first, and the expression on her face was the careful, waiting kind, the one that asked a question without language. Victoria crouched down and signed, slowly, "You stay with me. 90 more days. Then we look again." Lily looked at her hands, processing. Then she signed. "And after?" Victoria looked at Owen. Owen looked at Lily. "We don't know yet," Victoria said, "but we're going to figure it out, all of us." Lily looked between them. Then she wrote in her sketchbook, "Is Mom okay?" The question sat in the room. "She's working on it," Victoria said. Lily nodded. She closed the sketchbook. She stood up and picked up her coat from the chair beside her, and she looked at both of them, and then she walked to the door and stopped and turned back and signed, "Can we get food? I'm hungry." Victoria made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob and landed closer to a laugh. "Yeah, baby," she said. "We can get food." They went to a diner 2 blocks from the courthouse. Not a special place, not a destination, just a booth and a laminated menu and a waitress who called everyone honey and brought Lily a hot chocolate without being asked because she'd looked at the table and made an accurate assessment. Owen sat across from Victoria and Lily. He ordered coffee. Lily ordered pancakes, which the menu noted were available all day, which Lily had confirmed by pointing at the relevant text with a look of profound satisfaction at the world containing this information. They ate mostly without speaking about the hearing. Lily drew on the paper placemat with a crayon the waitress had produced from somewhere. Victoria ate her sandwich with the focused, mechanical energy of someone refueling rather than enjoying. Owen drank his coffee and watched the street through the window. After a while, Victoria said, "I need to tell you something." He looked at her. She had her hands around her coffee cup, and she was looking at them, not at him. I've been doing this thing," she said, "where I tell myself that I can't, that this isn't the right time to—" She stopped. "That there's too much going on to also be—" Another stop. "Victoria," Owen said. "I'm trying to say something," she said. "Let me." He waited. She looked up at him. "I've been managing this whole situation," she said. "Kara and the hearing and Lily and the legal process and the company and just all of it, all the pieces of it, and I've been managing it, and somewhere in the middle of that I started— You became—" She pressed her lips together. "I started needing you to be there. Not wanting, needing. And I didn't tell you that because I didn't think it was fair to need something from you that you hadn't signed up for." Owen looked at her steadily. Lily was drawing on the placemat, apparently absorbed, though Owen had learned that apparent absorption and actual absorption were different things with Lily. "I'm not here because I signed up for something," he said. Victoria looked at him. "I'm here because I want to be here," he said. "That's been true for a while. You knew that." "I knew it," she said. "I didn't want to use it." "It's not a resource," he said. "It's just—" He paused, looking for the right word. "It's just true." Victoria was quiet for a moment. She looked at Lily, who was still drawing. A house, he noticed, the same kind of house she always drew, but this one had a table visible through the window, and figures sitting at it. "I love her," Victoria said, quietly. Not news, just finally a sentence. "I know she's Kara's daughter. I know what the right outcome probably is. I know—" She stopped. "I love her, and I am not capable of being neutral about what happens to her. I can't be. And I've been trying to manage that, to keep it separate from the legal reality of the situation, and I just—" She looked back at Owen. "I can't do that alone anymore. I don't want to." Owen leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then don't," he said. She looked at him with the expression that he'd first seen in the kitchen with the dishes, the measuring look, the one that calculated trust. "I'm scared," she said, very simply, the way she said important things. "I know," he said. "Not of the hearing, of—" She gestured slightly between them. "Of this, of needing someone and having them—" She stopped. "I haven't been good at this. Before. At letting someone in far enough to—" "I know that too," he said. She looked at him. "And you're still here." "Still here," he said. Lily, without looking up from her drawing, slid the placemat across the table toward Owen. He looked at it. She'd drawn the diner booth. 3 figures, the tall businesslike one, the broad-shouldered one, and the small one with the sketchbook. They were sitting together at a table. In the middle of the table, she'd drawn something that might have been a coffee cup or a hot chocolate. At the bottom, in her careful small handwriting, "This is real." Owen looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he looked at Lily, who was watching him with the serious, watchful eyes that had looked at him across a cafe table 5 months ago and decided, apparently, that he had the right kind of eyes. He slid the placemat back to her and signed, "Yes, it is." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to drawing. Owen looked at Victoria. She was watching him with an expression that was open and tired and something else, something that hadn't been there in October, something that had been accumulating slowly over 5 months of Tuesday dinners and hallway floors and 4 Saturdays of building a room. "Owen," she said. "Yeah." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, in the same quiet, direct way she had of saying the things that cost her something. "I love you. I think I've been in love with you for a while. And I know the timing is terrible, and everything is complicated, and I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know." The diner was warm and smelled like coffee and maple syrup, and the ordinary, particular smell of a Tuesday afternoon in a booth somewhere in the middle of a city that was going on entirely without awareness that anything significant was happening in this corner of it. Owen looked at the woman across from him, at the tiredness in her face and the openness of it and the way she was holding very still, waiting. "It's not terrible timing," he said. She looked at him. "The timing is just the timing," he said. "It doesn't change what's true." She searched his face for a moment, then quietly, "What's true?" "That I've been in love with you since January," he said, "probably earlier, and that I'm not going anywhere. And that whatever happens in 90 days and whatever happens after that, you're not going to deal with it alone." He paused. "That's what's true." The silence between them was the tolerable kind, the good kind, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Lily reached across the table and patted Owen's hand twice, the same two-pat gesture she'd used on the hallway floor months ago. Matter of fact. Settled. Like a period at the end of a sentence that had taken a long time to finish. Victoria laughed. An actual laugh, quiet and real and slightly undone. The kind that happens when something that has been held very tightly for a very long time finally lets go. "She does that," Owen said. "I know," Victoria said. "She's been doing it to me for years. I still don't know where she learned it." Outside, the city did what it always did. Moved, generated noise, existed entirely without sentiment. The light through the diner window was the late afternoon kind, angled and gold, the kind that makes ordinary things look briefly considered. Owen refilled his coffee from the carafe on the table. Victoria finished her sandwich. Lily added a mailbox to the drawing of the house with the figures in it. The three of them sat together in the booth, in the light, and nothing was resolved and everything was complicated, and the next 90 days were an open question, and beyond that was more open questions, and all of it was true and real, and none of it was going anywhere. That was enough. For this Thursday, for this booth. It was enough. The 90 days did not pass cleanly. Owen had known they wouldn't. He'd known it the way you know a job is going to run over schedule before it actually does. That particular combination of too many variables and too little margin that experienced people learn to recognize early. But knowing something is coming doesn't fully prepare you for the specific shape it takes when it arrives. The first supervised visit happened on a Saturday morning in early April at a family services office on the west side. A neutral room with a round table and chairs and a wall of windows that let in enough light to feel less institutional than it actually was. Victoria did not attend. The arrangement was deliberate. The social worker, Dr. Whelan's designated contact, supervised. Victoria waited at home. Owen stayed at the apartment with her, not because she asked him to, but because he showed up, which by April was simply what he did. Victoria spent that Saturday morning cleaning the apartment, not because it needed cleaning. It was already clean, but because her hands needed something to do that wasn't waiting. Owen watched her move through the rooms with a sponge and a bottle of all-purpose cleaner and understood that this was not housekeeping. It was management of the specific anxiety of being unable to control something that directly affected someone you loved. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. He was there. When Victoria had wiped down the same section of countertop twice without noticing, he said, "Come sit down." She looked at the counter, then she looked at him. Then she put the sponge in the sink and sat down across from him, and he pushed a mug toward her. "What if she—" Victoria started. "We don't know yet," he said. "What if Lily comes back and she's—" "Then we deal with it," he said. "When she gets home. Not now." Victoria wrapped her hands around the mug. She looked at the table. "I keep running through scenarios," she said. "All the ways it could go wrong. All the ways Kara could—" "You can't scenario plan for people," Owen said. "You know that." "I know that," she said. "I can't stop doing it." He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. She also didn't look up, just looked at their hands on the table and breathed. They sat like that until the social worker's car pulled up outside. Lily came through the door an hour and 40 minutes later, moving in the way she moved when she was carrying something heavy internally. Not slowly, but carefully, each step deliberate. She had her sketchbook under her arm and her coat buttoned wrong, one button off from the bottom, which she hadn't noticed or hadn't cared about. Victoria crouched down and looked at her face with the specific attention of someone reading a language they'd been studying for years. Lily looked back. Then she signed. She cried. Victoria's breath caught slightly. Your mom? Lily nodded. How was that for you? Victoria asked. She said it directly, the way Lily's therapist had taught her to ask. Not, how are you, which was too broad, but specific. How was that? Lily thought about it. Then she wrote in her sketchbook and held it up. Sad. But the real kind. Not the scary kind. Owen, standing in the kitchen doorway, read this and thought about the distinction. That at 6 years old, Lily had developed a taxonomy of her mother's sadness, a way of categorizing which sadness was grief and which was crisis. That this was knowledge no child should need and that Lily had acquired it anyway, the way children acquire the knowledge their circumstances require. Victoria nodded at the whiteboard. Okay, she said. That's okay. Lily looked at her. Then she wrote again. She said she was sorry, like 100 times. People do that when they've hurt someone, Victoria said. Lily considered this. Then, do you believe her? Victoria was quiet for a second longer than usual. Then she said, I believe she means it. I believe she's trying. She paused. Whether trying is enough, that takes time to know. Lily looked at this answer from several angles, the way she processed things she was working out. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied with the honesty of it, and walked past Victoria toward her room. She stopped in the doorway of the blue room and looked at it. The window seat, the shelves, the particular light of a Saturday afternoon through the narrow window. And then she went in and closed the door softly. Owen and Victoria stood in the hallway. She's okay, Owen said. She's okay right now, Victoria said. That's all we've got, he said. Right now. She looked at him, and for a moment he could see all of it on her face. The fear and the love and the exhaustion, and underneath all of that, something that had been growing since October, since a cafe table, and an Allen wrench and a child signing kind eyes across a room. Something that was, despite everything, still there. Yeah, she said. Right now. The visits continued. Every other Saturday, then every Saturday as April became May, and the court's review timeline advanced. The social worker's reports were positive. Kara came to every visit, not late, not canceling, showing up with the specific punctuality of someone who understood that punctuality was currently evidence. Lily's reports, filtered through the sketchbook and the whiteboard, and her sessions with her therapist were more complicated. Kara was different. Lily could tell. But Lily had been through enough cycles of different to know that different needed time to prove itself, and she was extending cautious, measured attention rather than open trust, which Dr. Patel said was exactly appropriate and actually demonstrated significant emotional intelligence for her age. Owen drove Lily to 3 of the visits himself, when Victoria had conflicts she couldn't move. He waited in the car, usually with a thermos of coffee and a set of blueprints he was reviewing for a job, and he was there when the social worker brought Lily back out. After the 3rd time, Lily got in the car and signed. She showed me pictures of when I was a baby. Owen started the car. Were they good pictures? Lily thought about it. Then, I looked like a potato. Owen laughed. A real one. Most babies do. She looked out the window as he pulled into traffic. After a moment, she signed, She has a nice apartment. She showed me on her phone. It has a window. Does it? A big one. A pause. Not as good as mine. Owen glanced at her. She was still looking out the window, her reflection slightly visible in the glass. No, he agreed. Probably not. She was quiet for a few blocks. Then she wrote in the sketchbook she'd been holding on her lap, Owen. Yeah, if I have to go live there. Will you still come see me? He stopped at a red light. He looked at her reflection in the glass. Yeah, he said, I'll still come see you. She looked at what she'd written. Then she wrote underneath it, Promise? Promise, he said. She closed the sketchbook. She looked out the window for the rest of the drive, and Owen drove and didn't say anything else, because there wasn't anything else useful to say. And some silences you just have to sit inside of and let them be what they are. The crisis, when it finally came, didn't announce itself as one. It was a Wednesday in late May, 8 days before the review hearing. Owen was on a job site when Victoria called, the fourth time in 40 minutes, which told him everything he needed to know before he answered. "She's here," Victoria said. "Who's here?" "Kara." Her voice was level, but at the top of its register, the place it went when she was managing something that was threatening to exceed her capacity. "She's here at the apartment. She showed up. Not a scheduled visit, no social worker, nothing. She says she needs to see Lily. She's in the hallway." Owen was already walking toward his truck. "Have you called Renata?" "I called Renata first. She says don't let her in, document everything. She's calling the court monitor." A pause. "Lily knows she's here. She heard the buzzer and I made the mistake of... She saw her through the intercom camera. She's in her room." "Is Kara... How is she presenting?" A pause. "She's not... I don't think she's using... She's upset. She's..." Victoria's voice dropped slightly. "She's crying. She's standing in my hallway crying and asking me to please just let her see her daughter, and I..." She stopped. "I'm 15 minutes away," Owen said. "Owen, you don't..." "15 minutes," he said, and hung up. He made it in 12, but he could hear it from the elevator. Not words, just the specific quality of voices in conflict, the low controlled tone of someone trying to maintain, and the higher, less controlled tone of someone who has come past the point of maintenance. He knocked. Victoria opened the door immediately, like she'd been standing near it. Kara was in the hallway outside the apartment door, which Victoria had opened but not stepped aside from. She was... Owen took her in quickly, upright, coherent, not presenting as intoxicated or in crisis in the clinical sense. But her eyes were red and she'd been crying for a while, and there was a quality to her that reminded him of a structure under more load than its design accounted for. She looked at Owen. He was a person she'd seen exactly twice before, once at a distance outside the courthouse, once briefly when he'd been leaving Victoria's apartment and Kara had been in the lobby, a moment of mutual recognition that neither of them had addressed. "Who are you?" she said. Not aggressively, just a real question. "I'm Owen," he said. I'm part of Lily's life." Kara looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Victoria. "I'm not trying to cause a problem," she said. I need to see her. I found out what the Guardian ad litem is recommending in the review report, and Her voice broke slightly. "I need to see my daughter." Victoria's jaw was tight. "Kara, the social worker has to be present. You know that. That's the arrangement." "I know what the arrangement is," Kara said. "I've been following the arrangement for 3 months. I've been to every single visit. I've done every single thing they asked me to do, and Renata's report is going to say that Lily is..." She stopped. "That Lily is integrated, that she's bonded, that moving her would constitute a disruption." Her voice was not angry. It was something worse than angry. It was a person confronting a conclusion they'd seen coming and had been hoping was wrong. "She's my daughter." "I know she is," Victoria said. "Then let me see her." "Not like this, Kara." "Like what?" Kara's voice cracked fully. "Like her mother? Like someone who actually..." She stopped herself. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth for a second. Then she lowered it. "I have been sober for 112 days. I have gone to every meeting, every visit, every appointment. I got the apartment. I got the job. I did everything they said to do." She looked at Victoria with an expression that was raw in the specific way of someone who has worked very hard and is confronting the possibility that the work wasn't enough. And the report is going to say she shouldn't come home. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I haven't read the full report," she said carefully. "Neither have you." "I know what it's going to say," Kara said. Owen had been standing slightly to the side, present but not intervening, letting the two sisters have the conversation. But now he looked down the hallway toward Lily's door, which was closed, and he thought about Lily on the other side of it, about the 6-year-old who had developed a taxonomy of her mother's sadness, who drew houses that weren't real, who had learned to measure hope in careful, rationed amounts. He thought about what it meant to protect someone, whether protection sometimes meant letting a hard thing happen in a managed way rather than having it happen in an unmanaged one. He said, "Can I say something?" Both women looked at him. Kara? He said it directly, the way he said things when he meant them. I think you should leave right now and call your attorney and do this through the process. Because anything that happens in this hallway today is going to be in a report, and you've worked too hard to have something in a report. He paused. That's the practical thing. Kara looked at him. But I also think, he said, that you should know Lily talks about you. Not a lot, but she does. She told me your apartment has a window. She said it as a compliment. He held Kara's gaze. She's not trying to forget you. She's just trying to figure out how to be safe while she waits for you to be ready. Kara's face, which had been holding itself together by force, did something complicated and slow. Her chin moved. She looked at the ceiling. She took a breath. She's really okay, she said. Her voice was stripped down to its bare components. She's actually okay in there? She's okay, Owen said. She has a room she designed herself. She's in a school she likes. She has a best friend who's been learning sign language since October specifically because of her. He paused. She's okay. Kara pressed her lips together. She nodded. A single nod. The kind that is more about holding yourself together than agreeing with anything. Then she looked at Victoria. I don't hate you, Kara said. I know I've said things, done things. I know what the last 2 years have been. She stopped. I don't hate you. I'm just... She stopped again. Then, I'm scared she's going to love you more than she loves me. The hallway was very quiet. Victoria looked at her sister for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was even, but with something softer underneath it. She loves you because you're her mother, she said. That's not a competition I'm in. I don't want to be in it. Then why? Because she needed somewhere safe while you were getting well, Victoria said. That's the only reason. That's the whole reason. Kara looked at her for a long time. Then she looked at Owen. Then she looked at the closed door down the hallway. Okay, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Okay, I'll go. She turned toward the elevator. Then she stopped and turned back, and she looked at Owen one more time. Thank you, she said. For... She gestured slightly, vaguely, at the whole of the situation. For being here. For her. Owen nodded. The elevator came. Kara got in. The doors closed. Victoria stood in the doorway of her apartment and let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than her lungs. She put one hand on the doorframe and leaned on it slightly, just for a second, just enough to steady herself. Then Lily's door opened. She came out in her socks and the oversized sweater, sketchbook in hand, and she walked down the hallway and looked at the empty space where her mother had been. She looked at Victoria. She looked at Owen. She wrote in her sketchbook and held it up. Is she okay? Victoria looked at the question. Then she crouched down to Lily's level. She's working on it, she said. The same answer she'd been giving for months. The honest answer that neither promised too much nor gave up too much. She loves you. She's just not quite there yet. Lily looked at this answer. Then she wrote, But she's trying? She's really trying, Victoria said. Lily looked at the elevator doors, which were closed and ordinary. Then she looked at Owen. She signed slowly. You told her I'm okay? Yeah, he said. I told her. She nodded. Then she went back to her room and closed the door. And this time it was the truly quiet close. The settled kind, not the I need a minute kind, but the I've processed a thing and I'm going to draw now kind. Owen had learned the difference. He and Victoria stood in the hallway of her apartment, in the particular silence that follows a thing that could have gone badly and didn't. You handled that, Victoria said, not as a compliment exactly, just an observation. We handled it, Owen said. She looked at him. Then she reached over and took his hand, not gently or tentatively, but in the straightforward way she'd started doing things since the diner. Since the afternoon when she'd said the word love plainly and without decoration, and he'd said it back. I need to call Renata, she said. Go call Renata, he said. I'll make coffee. The review hearing was 8 days later. Owen was there again, same gallery, same courthouse smell, same institutional light. Renata presented the Guardian ad litem's report, which did, as Kara had feared, emphasize Lily's integration and the risk that disruption posed to her documented progress. Dr. Whelan testified about the established attachment relationships, the therapeutic gains, the school stability. Kara's attorney presented her evidence: 4 months of maintained sobriety, consistent employment, consistent visitation. Letters from her counselor and sponsor, photographs of the apartment, the room she'd furnished for Lily with the big window. A letter from Kara herself, which her attorney read into the record, that was, Owen heard it from the gallery and thought about what Kara had said in the hallway, that Lily might love Victoria more. A letter written by someone who had arrived at a difficult understanding and was being honest about it rather than arguing against it. The letter said, essentially, I am not asking for my daughter back because I believe I deserve her back. I'm asking for a path toward earning the right to be her home again, and I understand that path is longer than I want it to be. The judge was a different one than the first hearing, a woman in her 50s who asked precise questions and listened to the answers without indicating how she was weighing them. She met with Lily privately, as before. Owen waited. When the ruling came, it was this. The current guardianship arrangement with Victoria would continue as the primary arrangement. Kara's visitation would expand to unsupervised day visits, 4 hours, then 6, a graduated increase contingent on compliance. A permanency hearing would be scheduled for 6 months out. At that hearing, the court would consider a longer-term arrangement, which could include a gradual transition to a shared arrangement if Kara's stability was maintained. It was not a reunification. It was not a closing of the door. It was a specific, structured path with real conditions and real timelines, and it was the closest thing to justice that the situation allowed for, which was to say it was imperfect and necessary and probably correct. Kara sat at her table and listened to it and nodded in the places she was supposed to nod. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. She looked at the hand for a second and then looked at Victoria across the courtroom, and Victoria looked back at her, and something passed between the two sisters that Owen couldn't fully read, but that felt like the first honest communication they'd had in a long time. After, in the corridor, something happened that Owen had not predicted. Kara walked toward Victoria. Her attorney was saying something quietly to her, clearly advising against it, but Kara kept walking, and Victoria turned and saw her coming and went still. Kara stopped in front of her. She said, "Can I have 5 minutes? Not about legal stuff, just 5 minutes." Victoria looked at Renata. Renata's expression was careful, but she nodded slightly. "Okay," Victoria said. Owen moved away. He found a bench near the windows and sat down, and he watched from a distance as the two women stood together in the courthouse corridor and talked. Not argued, just talked, in the low, careful way of people who are aware that the words they're choosing matter. He couldn't hear them. He watched their faces. Victoria's was controlled but not closed. Kara's was the same as the hallway, stripped down, honest, showing more than it wanted to. After 5 minutes, Kara walked back to her attorney. Victoria walked back to Renata. Owen watched both of them and thought about what it costs a person to be honest about the ways they've failed, and about what it costs another person to stand across from that honesty and not look away. When Victoria came and sat beside him on the bench, he said, "What did she say?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She said she knows Lily is better here right now. She said she knows that, and she hates that she knows it, and she's going to do what the court said and take the visits and work toward the permanency hearing, and she's asking me—" She stopped. "She's asking me to include her. Not to take over, not to give Lily back yet, not to cut her out of things, school events, birthdays, things like that, if it's possible." Owen waited. "I said yes," Victoria said. He looked at her. "It's the right thing," she said. "I know it's the right thing. It's just—" She pressed her lips together. "I've been angry at her for a long time. And today she stood there and was just honest. And it's very hard to stay angry at someone who is being genuinely honest." "Yeah," Owen said. "It is." She looked at him sideways. "You know from experience?" He thought about his ex-wife, about the specific, exhausted conversations of the last year of their marriage, when both of them had finally stopped trying to win and started trying to be honest instead. about how understanding someone's reasons didn't erase the damage but made it possible eventually to stop carrying it like a weapon. Yeah, he said. A little. They told Lily about the ruling that evening. All together, at the kitchen table, the same configuration as always. Owen and Victoria, Mia there because Lily had asked specifically if she could be there, which Mia had taken seriously enough to ask her father if it was appropriate, which he'd said yes. Victoria signed and spoke simultaneously, the way she did when she wanted to make sure Lily caught everything. She explained the day visits, the timeline, the permanency hearing in 6 months. Lily listened. She looked at the whiteboard where Victoria had drawn a simple timeline so Lily could see the shape of it. Then she picked up the marker. She wrote, "So she's not taking me right now." "No," Victoria said, "not right now. But she might later. It depends on how the next 6 months go. For her." Lily looked at the timeline. She tapped the pencil on the end of it, the permanency hearing, once. Then she wrote, "What does permanent mean?" Victoria looked at Owen. He looked at her. "It means," Victoria said carefully, "that after 6 months, the people in charge are going to make a longer-term decision about where home is for you." Lily absorbed this. Then, "Where do you think home is?" The table was very quiet. Victoria said, "I think home can be more than one place. If the people love you the same in both of them." Lily looked at this. She turned it over. Then she wrote, "Mom cried again today, when you talked?" "Yeah," Victoria said. "We both did. A little." "That's okay," Lily wrote. "Crying isn't always the scary kind." She looked at what she'd written and underlined the word okay. Then she looked at Owen. She signed, "Are you staying for dinner?" "If you want me to," he said. She signed, "Obviously," with the same expression Mia used when something should have been apparent. Owen looked at Mia, who shrugged in a way that communicated she had always found the question unnecessary. He stayed for dinner. 6 months is both a short time and a long one, depending on what fills it. What filled it, for Owen, was the accumulation of ordinary things that had stopped feeling temporary. Tuesday dinners that extended to other nights, a drawer key at Victoria's apartment, then a hook for his jacket by the door, then the particular comfort of knowing where things were without being told, the extra phone charger, the good knife, the brand of coffee Victoria actually liked versus the one she bought when she was distracted. He and Victoria did not move in together during those 6 months. They talked about it once, carefully, and agreed that there was no reason to force the timeline of something that was already working at the pace it had chosen. What they were was real, and it was clear, and it did not require a formal restructuring to be those things. That was the conclusion they arrived at, sitting on the couch in Victoria's apartment on a Sunday night in July while Lily was asleep and Mia was at a sleepover, and it was a conclusion they were both genuinely comfortable with, which Owen thought was itself a kind of evidence that they had gotten something right. The Kara situation unfolded slowly and imperfectly, which was the only way it could. The day visits happened. Most of them went well. 2 of them were harder, once because Lily came back quiet in the difficult way, not the processing way, and once because Kara had a difficult week and wasn't fully present at a visit in a way Lily noticed and reported to her therapist. But there was no relapse. The sobriety held. The consistency held. And Lily, over the course of those 6 months, began to speak about her mother in a slightly different register. Still careful, still measured, but with less of the bracing quality that had been in her voice before. The anticipatory flinch of someone waiting for the fall. In September, Lily started a new school year. She had 3 friends now, not acquaintances, actual friends, 2 of them hearing and 1 who was also deaf, and who Lily had found in the first week and apparently immediately recognized as a kindred spirit. She brought them home one afternoon in October, almost exactly a year after the café, and she showed them her room with the quiet pride of a person showing a thing they've built. And Owen, who was there fixing a hinge that had come loose on the closet door, overheard one of them say the window seat was the coolest thing they'd ever seen. He said nothing. He fixed the hinge. The permanency hearing was on a Tuesday in November, which Owen noted privately was the same day of the week as the cafe blind date, which he did not consider meaningful but noticed anyway. The ruling was a long time coming. It had been prepared for carefully by everyone involved: Renata, Kara's attorney, Dr. Whelan's final report, the 7 months of documentation that represented the shape of two families' complicated negotiations with each other. The court established a formal shared arrangement. Lily would continue to live primarily with Victoria, who was granted extended guardianship with a clear legal status. Kara would have regular unsupervised visits, building toward full weekends beginning in the new year, with a review scheduled for 18 months out to assess whether a more equal shared arrangement was appropriate. Dr. Whelan was appointed as an ongoing monitor. It was not simple. It was not the story where the mother recovers and everything returns to how it was supposed to be, because there was no longer a clear picture of how it was supposed to be. There was only what existed, and what existed was a 6-year-old who had 2 women who loved her, and 1 man who had built her a room and learned her language and showed up every Tuesday for a year, and a best friend who had learned sign language specifically for her, and a window seat with storage underneath where she kept, among other things, approximately 40 pages of drawings of houses that were now undeniably real. After the ruling, standing in the courthouse corridor, the same institutional light, Victoria turned to Owen and said, "It's not over." "No," he said, "it's not over. There will be another review, and then another one probably." "Yeah. And Kara is going to have hard weeks. There are going to be hard weeks." "Yes," he said. "There are." She looked at him. "And you're still not going anywhere." "Still not going anywhere," he said. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she said, "I still don't entirely understand why." He thought about the café. About 23 minutes of waiting and 2 hours of something he hadn't expected. About a little girl signing kind eyes across a table before she'd said, communicated, another word. About hallway floors and window seats and paint swatches, and the particular shade of blue that looked different in the morning than at night. He thought about his daughter telling him, at 8 years old, with complete authority, that there was a lot going on with everyone. He thought about what it meant to choose someone not because the situation was easy, but because the person was worth it, because the specific weight of a specific life, including all its complications, was a weight you wanted to know. "Because you're worth it," he said. "The whole of it, all the complicated parts." Victoria looked at him with an expression that was not performed or managed, just hers. "That's a very simple answer," she said. "It's a simple thing," he said, dressed up in a complicated situation. She almost smiled. Then she looked down the corridor to where Lily was standing with Dr. Whelan, sketchbook under her arm, already drawing something on the blank page she'd opened. "What do you think she's drawing?" Victoria said. Owen looked at Lily, at the focused, precise attention she gave to everything she made, at the way she stood, grounded, present, working something out in the language she'd always trusted most. "Probably a house," he said. Victoria was quiet for a moment, then, "She has one now?" "She has one now," he agreed. They walked over to her together. Lily looked up when they reached her and showed them the drawing without being asked. It was the apartment, recognizable from the window shape and the door, the layout she knew by now from the inside. She'd drawn the rooms, the kitchen, the living space, the blue bedroom, and in each room she'd drawn small figures. In the kitchen, 1 tall figure and 1 medium one. In the blue bedroom, 1 small one at the window seat. In the living room, 2 small figures side by side. At the top of the page, the same word she'd written on the diner placemat, the same word she'd written on the drawing she'd shown Owen through a courthouse door 9 months ago. Home. Owen looked at it. Then he looked at Lily. She signed at him, slowly and clearly, making sure he caught each sign. "I know you kept your promise." He'd told her, in the car after a visit, that he would still come see her. That was the promise. And he had, every time without fail, not as an obligation, but as the simple extension of who he had become over the course of a year of showing up. He signed back, "I always will." She nodded, satisfied, settled. And then she turned the drawing over to the blank side and started a new one, because she always had more to make, and the afternoon was still young, and there was always another house to put on paper before it was real. Owen stood in the corridor of the courthouse where things had been decided and thought about the year behind him, not with the clean narrative clarity that things acquire in memory later, not with any sense that it had unfolded the way it was supposed to, but with the specific, imperfect knowledge of someone who had lived through something and come out the other side changed by exactly the parts of it that had been hardest. He had not come into this looking for a family. He had shown up to a blind date because his cousin asked him to, because he was 32 years old and still believed, somewhere underneath the practical efficiency of his daily life, that good things were possible. He had sat at a table for 23 minutes feeling like an idiot, and then a woman had come through the door carrying a child and an Allen wrench and a weight that belonged to everyone in her life, and a child had looked at him across the room and decided he had the right kind of eyes. That was what it had been, at the beginning. A small assessment made by a small person who had learned through years of necessary vigilance to be accurate about people. She had been accurate. The weight was still there, for all of them. It didn't go away when the hearing ended. It didn't resolve into something clean. Victoria would still carry the fear of the next review, the uncertainty of Kara's continued recovery, the daily labor of being responsible for a child whose future was still being negotiated by courts and attorneys, and the slow, difficult progress of a person learning to be reliable. Owen would still carry his own load, Mia, the work, the particular ordinary difficulty of building a life that holds. Lily would carry the complex, enduring knowledge of a child who has loved people who disappointed her and learned to love them anyway. But you carry things differently when there are more people carrying them with you. That was the thing Owen had learned, or relearned, or understood for the first time, in the specific way that only experience teaches. It was not about finding someone whose life was simple. It was not about waiting until the situation resolved itself into something manageable. It was about showing up for the complicated version, the real version, the version where nothing is promised and the window seat takes 4 Saturdays to build and the paint goes on slightly darker than the swatch. And it's exactly right anyway. He looked at Victoria, who was watching Lily draw with the expression she always had. The love and the vigilance and the tiredness, and underneath all of that, the thing that had been growing since October, the thing that existed not in spite of everything but alongside it, real and persistent and not requiring perfect conditions to survive. He looked at his daughter, who had just arrived. He'd texted her when the ruling came out, and she'd insisted on being picked up from school and brought to the courthouse, arriving now breathless from running from the car with a winter coat she hadn't fully put on, scanning the corridor for Lily with the specific urgency of a person who needs to verify with their own eyes that the important thing is okay. Mia saw Lily and went to her. Lily saw Mia and held up the drawing. Mia looked at it and signed something fast that Owen only half caught. Lily signed back, faster. Mia laughed. The corridor was full of people with their own complicated situations, moving toward their own exits, carrying their own weights in their own ways. No one paid attention to the 2 girls in the corner, one hearing, one deaf, both entirely absorbed in the drawing and the conversation, bridging whatever gap existed between them with the practiced ease of people who have decided the gap is not, actually, an obstacle. Owen watched them. This was what he had. Not a resolved situation, a living one, not a finished thing, a real one. Not a story that had arrived at its clean conclusion, but a family in the actual sense, imperfect, evolving, held together not by circumstance but by the repeated decision made daily to stay. He had walked into a café on a Tuesday afternoon with an ironed shirt and low expectations. He had walked out of it carrying something he couldn't have predicted and wouldn't, for any reason, put down. Victoria came and stood beside him. She didn't say anything. She slipped her hand into his, in the straightforward way she'd started doing it. Not tentative, not performing, just the simple fact of it. He held on. Across the corridor, Lily looked up from her drawing and saw them standing there. She looked at them for a moment with the serious, watchful eyes that had first assessed him across a café table 14 months ago. Then she signed, small and clear, just for them. Good. Just that. One sign. The verdict of a 6-year-old who had learned to be accurate about people, and who had looked at this man and this situation and this particular configuration of love and difficulty and decided, as she had decided at the beginning, that it was exactly what it appeared to be. Owen signed back. Yeah, good. And it was. Good.